Chapter 449. Little Lu, remember, if you see this kind of flame, don't be afraid. With your non-phase sword bone, even if you resist it head-on, you won't get hurt. But if the color of the flame becomes like this, you must be careful. Remember to isolate it with your non-phase sword chi. In any case, you can't touch it, understand? On the training field, 6th Elder Lu Li still maintained his amiable smile, but his hand had turned into a dark purple flame, which made his smile look even more ferocious. Wang Lu squinted his eyes and carefully observed the demon flame in Elder Lu Li's hand. It was the genuine demon flame. From the breath of the flame, Wang Lu even vaguely associated it with the demon he saw in the Tomb of Immortals. He didn't ask how Lu Li could release the demon flame with the identity of an immortal cultivator. He knew that this must be a secret that couldn't be easily revealed. However, with the special training of such an elder who was proficient in the demon race's method, Wang Lu's ability to recognize the demon race was rapidly improving. The power of the demon race is too numerous to enumerate, but for you, the real difficulty lies in the penetration that is impossible to guard against. I believe that with your eyesight, you won't confront those demon kings, but I'm afraid that you will be defeated by some small characters. Since your debut, no matter what you do, you have been particularly smooth. Defeating the strong is almost the norm, but there are not many cases of bullying the weak. In other words, you have no experience in this area. Don't think otherwise. Bullying the weak also requires the ability. Otherwise, how do you explain those powerful people who fell under your feet? Caution is necessary, but it's far from enough. Without enough knowledge, the so-called caution is just self-righteous neurosis. You must fully understand the opponent, only then can your caution be meaningful. The first is poison. The most troublesome weapon of the demon race is poison. The demon race's poison is impossible to guard against. Your non-phase sword bone alone can't make you immune to poison. The demon race's method of poisoning is also pervasive. Therefore, from now on, you need to seriously train the method of detoxification. I have 100 kinds of common poisons in my hand. You must learn to suppress and neutralize all of them. Seeing a row of porcelain bottles in the hands of the 6th elder, which were sealed with all kinds of strange marks, showing a strong sense of danger, Wang Lu vigilantly asked, "Is this the actual combat teaching?" The 6th elder smiled and said, "Of course it's actual combat training." Wang Lu immediately said, "I don't think it's necessary in actual combat. I'm a regular customer of the Misty Peaks cafeteria. What kind of poison have I not tasted? That famous Western continent chef is much better than the poison devil, but I can still talk and laugh with her." "Oh, who are you chatting with?" As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, he heard Aya's faint laughter behind him. However, the woman's usual kind laughter made the hairs on his back stand on end, as if a great crisis was descending on his head. The next moment, Wang Lu reacted like lightning. He turned around and retorted, "Why are you everywhere? And every time I evaluate your cooking, you'll appear. How much confidence do you have in your cooking skills?" Aya was stunned by Wang Lu's sharp counterattack. "I'm just more concerned about other people's evaluation of me." "You're following me, tailing me? You have no morals and shame the name of a knight." Alright, I have something to do now. You can go back first. I'll come back to teach you a lesson after I'm done." After sending Aya away, Wang Lu still had to face the 6th Patriarch's cruel practical teaching. Well, with just a few words you can make a supreme-level powerhouse retreat. Little Lu, it seems that you're in a good state. Then, I don't have to be merciful. While speaking, the 6th Patriarch slowly opened his mustard seed bag. God knows where he found more than 100 bottles of demonic realm poison, and each bottle of poison seemed to be quite old. When Lu Li took out some of the bottles, he even showed a trace of pain. But this made Wang Lu even more vigilant. How strange was this poison? "Hey, 6th Master, you're not going to use your position to avenge a private grudge, are you? Some time ago, Master stole from the sect's storeroom. She brought this upon herself. Don't take it out on me." Little Lu, it's really sad to hear you say that. Do I look like a person who will use my position to avenge a private grudge? You are the lead disciple of the sect and bear an important mission. As an elder of the sect, what I have to do now is to help you do a better job. Rest assured, these poisons are carefully selected by me, and the effect is absolutely good. It turned out that the effect of these poisons was indeed good. When Wang Lu tried the first bottle, he almost knelt down. When the poison entered his body, his non-phase sword bone, which he was so proud of, had no reaction at all. At first, Wang Lu thought that after he mastered the King Pill, his body's resistance to poison had reached a heaven-defying level, and he could completely ignore the damage. But soon he found that something was wrong because he felt that he seemed to be melting. Hey, am I sweating? Just now, there was something like a drop of liquid falling in front of me. Luli said, "That's not sweat but your face here?" As the elder spoke, he waved his hand and released a water mirror. In the mirror, Wang Lu's face was melting at an amazing speed. Especially the part in front of his forehead, it turned into a drop of water and dripped down from his brow bone. Am I turning into some kind of witch who will melt without taking any medicine? Luli faintly said, "If you keep talking nonsense after the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, even the gods won't be able to save you." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was shocked. He immediately began to hold his breath and circulate his magical power to expel the poison. But soon he found that it was really difficult. Because no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't find any poison in his body, and the melting of his body couldn't be faked. Okay, then I'll change my way of thinking. If I can't find the poison, then it's fine if I don't look for it. First, I need to keep my body from melting. And there was a corresponding method in the non-phase method. According to his master, it was called the beautiful body shaping technique. It stimulated the sword bone with magical power, and then used the sword bone to drive the body to change in the direction that the cultivator wanted. It looked somewhat similar to the transformation technique. However, it was different from the transformation technique. The beautiful body shaping technique involved the cultivator's foundation, and it produced a permanent change. Therefore, every change must be carefully carried out, and the process of change was full of difficulties. When a cultivator entered the king pill realm, the body, magical power, and primordial spirit had begun to be highly integrated. Therefore, it was impossible to change the body's image because it was likely to shake one's self-awareness, which would lead to problems in the entire cultivation method system. However, the non-phase method's ability to control the body had reached the pinnacle. According to the technique, Wang Lu began to try his best to maintain the shape of his body. Thus, for a time it could be seen that Wang Lu's skin and muscles were constantly melting and decomposing, but there was a powerful magical power that forcibly maintained the body from collapsing. Good, you didn't waste time in a dead end. Elder Luli nodded with satisfaction. Judging from the speed and method of adaptation, you're indeed worthy to be the sect's lead disciple. However, this is not enough. Wang Lu didn't forget to let out a hey sound. His current situation was certainly not enough. Even if he had the king pill realm and his magical power was endless, the consumption of the beautiful body shaping technique was still far greater than the supply. If he persisted like this, his magical power would eventually be exhausted. However, he had no other way. There were a lot of elixirs in his mustard seed bag, but Wang Lu didn't intend to try them. When the nature of the poison was not determined, random use of the medicine was likely to have the opposite effect. This point was vividly reflected in the neutral diary. During the Great War of Immortals and Demons, many cultivators mistakenly took elixirs after being poisoned, causing the poison to intensify and die. Fortunately, this was just a drill, so Elder Luli soon made his move. Little Lu seriously experienced this feeling. This is not any kind of spell, it's just a feeling. Remember it with your body. He reached out a hand and pressed it on Wang Lu's back. A stream of warm magical power came through. The magical power was not strong. At least for Elder Luli, who was at the peak of the nascent soul realm, this magical power was like a light breeze. Whether in quantity or quality, it was nothing special. Then, Elder Luli controlled the magical power and gently hooked several joints in Wang Lu's body. Immediately, Wang Lu felt cool all over his body, as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. His melting body also stabilized. What is the principle? Carefully savoring everything that happened in his body just now, Wang Lu was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. As Luli said, the operation of the magical power was not any kind of spell. It was just the flow of magical power. It just inexplicably flowed through some joints in his body, but it inconceivably cured the poison of the demon race. There is no principle. Luli said softly, we only know that it can cure the poison. As for why, no one can say for sure. Wang Lu said, then how did you ensure its efficacy? Try it out. Elder Luli lightly said. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was surprised. Try it out? With what human life? Could it be that in the past, Lingzhen school also operated human experiments for a living? However, Luli didn't let Wang Lu think too much and urged him, okay, let's start the next round. Our time is limited. Wang Lu's time was indeed limited. For a top student of Spirit Sword School, 3 months could master too many skills. However, in the face of the special topic of the demon race that the elders prepared for him, it was still insufficient. The demon race was really a huge topic. The knowledge of the demon race in Lingjian school was far above Wang Lu's expectation. The previous elders undoubtedly concealed too many things, but this time they all came out. Even if Wang Lu's learning ability was amazing, he still felt a bit powerless. From the confrontation of poison to the world-breaking spell, there were even specific tactics for each demon of different ranks. In these 3 months, Wang Lu really didn't rest for a quarter of an hour. 3 months later, the appointed time with Qianghua had arrived, and Wang Lu finally achieved great success under the violent attacks of the elders. On the last day, Wang Lu showed what he had learned in this period of time in front of the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall. The sect leader pondered for a long time and then sighed. Very good, now you should be able to take charge of things on your own. Letting you go to explore the demon world can barely be at ease. Wang Lu was thinking, what exactly happened in Lingjian school that made the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall so afraid of the demon race? Although he had benefited a lot from these 3 months of training, no matter how he looked at it, it seemed to be too big of a force. Fine, in this trip to the demon world he would expose all the secrets. Chapter 450. Half a day later, Wang Lu came to Xingjing sect. This was not his first visit to Xingjing sect. Previously, as a member of the Plentiful City Committee and the group of Immortal Tombs Management Committee, he was often invited to Xingjing sect to participate in important meetings and enjoyed the treatment of many Yuanying stage and even deity stage elders. However, at this time, when he visited Xingjing sect again, Wang Lu could not help but sigh with emotion at the magnificent scene of the number 1 sect in 9 regions. Generally, immortal cultivation sects often like to stay high in the clouds, isolating themselves from the secular world and showing their transcendental status. Even the Lingjian school was no exception. They only set up the Spirit Creek town at the foot of the mountain to contact the mortal world. As for Kunlun sect, it was even more extreme. They directly used clouds to hide their mountain gate. However, Xingjing sect chose a completely different path. With their mountain gate as the center, they built an astonishing scale city, which encompassed hundreds of miles or even thousands of miles of land. Moreover, this city was 3-dimensional. In addition to the important place above the clouds, from the mountainside to the foot of the mountain, and even below the immortal mountain, there were tens of thousands of people. In the beginning, it was not the intention of Xingjing sect. After the end of the Second Great War of Immortal and Demon, Xingjing sect's leadership position was basically consolidated, and many people came. However, it was impossible for Xingjing sect to accept all of them, so they could only reluctantly decline most of them. Some of those hopeless people left in disappointment, but some chose to persist. They settled down on the mountainside to cultivate. Most of these people had amazing skills, but unfortunately they could not reach the recruitment threshold of Xingjing sect. They could only hope that one day, this notoriously eclectic sect could recruit them and fulfill their long-cherished wish. Xingjing sect did not prevent these people from settling down, even though the mountainside was also the territory of Xingjing sect. However, for a sect that could invent artificial spirit root, the so-called immortal cultivation rules were worthless. Because of Xingjing sect's indulgence, more and more people gathered on the mountainside, and they even gradually formed their own forces. Over the past hundreds of years, these people have successfully achieved a tacit understanding with Xingjing sect in many aspects. Their influence began to radiate downward, all the way to the foot of the mountain, forming many towns similar to the Spirit Creek town. The people in the towns were between immortal and mortal. Many of them were just mortals, but they all had inextricable ties with immortal cultivators. Their greatest hope was to get in touch with the cultivators who lived on the mountainside. Although the Xingjing sect looked down on the people on the mountainside to the mortal world, they were still immortal-level characters. After hundreds of thousands of years of development, this clearly stratified and clearly structured city was fully formed. According to the census conducted by Xingjing sect 5 years ago, the population gathered around Xingjing sect had exceeded 100 million. These people enjoyed the protection of Xingjing sect, and at the same time, like hardworking worker ants, they transported mortal world resources to Xingjing sect. This model was called the Xingjing model, which had long been the focus and research of the entire immortal cultivation world of 9 regions. Even though he had this and that grudge with the Xingjing sect, Wang Lu still had to admit that this was a great sect, and they had created a great model. When it came to the combination of immortal and mortal, Wang Lu's development of the wisdom sect was based on the Xingjing sect model. Now he had long left the sect, and only occasionally pointed out the general direction of the sect. At present the effect was good. The development of the wisdom sect was still crazily snowballing. In addition to the foundation that Wang Lu had laid earlier in recent years with the change of the situation, The timely reference of the Xingjing sect model was also an important reason. Walking in the town at the foot of Xingjing sect, facing the endless stream of traffic, Wang Lu gradually fell into contemplation. He was now a Taoist master of the King Pill, but when he walked in the mortal world, his magical power and charm were restrained, unexpectedly no different from an ordinary youth. Although there were many people in the town, no one recognized this well-known lead disciple of the 5 uniques in the 9 regions. However, Wang Lu's peace didn't last long. Before long, Wang Lu suddenly saw the crowd around him parted. The pedestrians on both sides of the street were surprised and slightly frightened, and their eyes were focused on one place. At the end of the street, a pure white girl slowly descended from the sky. The girl's footsteps were swaying, and a faint fluctuation of magical power spread out, showing her identity as a cultivator. Of course, at the foot of Xingjing sect, there were tens of thousands of cultivators, so it was not unusual to see a cultivator coming down the mountain. In fact, among the people on both sides of the street, there were several Foundation establishment cultivators. The reason why there was such a sensational effect was because the belt of this pure white girl was embroidered with the logo of the Xingjing sect. This was a cultivator from the Immortal sect. "Greetings, senior brother Wang Lu." The girl came for Wang Lu. She gently walked to the front of Wang Lu, respectfully bowed, and then said with a sweet voice, "I'm Yu Mingjun from Xingjing sect. Senior sister Qianghua sent me to pick you up the mountain." Wang Lu was surprised. "Qianghua sent you to pick me up?" The girl smiled and explained, "Senior sister said that this gathering of the lead disciples was invited and hosted by her, so it should be Xingjing sect that comes forward to entertain you. Right now, a banquet has been prepared on the mountain, waiting for you to come up the mountain to welcome you. It's right for Xingjing sect to entertain me, but I'm curious, you, the Grand Taoist Master of the King Pill, was actually sent by Qianghua to entertain me? Is this to show off that Xingjing sect is full of talented people and endless extravagance?" Upon hearing this, Yu Mingjun gawked for a moment, and then her sweet smile rose again. "Because you're the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques. So, even the ancient strange beast Dream Taper was used to entertain you?" Yu Mingjun was really surprised. You can see it?" Wang Lu chuckled but didn't explain anything. He had Bai Shixian, an immortal beast that could transform into human form, so he was very sensitive to the aura of the same kind of human form cultivator. Although the rank of the Dream Taper was high, if it wasn't deliberately hidden, Wang Lu could see it at a glance. After her identity was called out, Yu Mingjun hesitated for a moment as if she had something to say, but there were some concerns. Wang Lu shook his head. "Okay, lead the way. Do you want to continue to be surrounded by people here?" Yu Mingjun suddenly nodded. "Oh, I'll take you up the mountain." Then a rainbow bloomed from the girl's palm, and the other end went straight to the Immortal sect. This was the etiquette used by Xingjing sect to entertain distinguished guests. Wang Lu followed the pure white girl to walk on the rainbow. In one step, they crossed the mountain gate and came to a quiet and elegant bamboo room. At the same time, Zhou Mumu's vigorous voice came from the bamboo room. "Finally, we've been waiting for you for a long time." In the bamboo room, Qianghua, Xiang Liang and Zhou Mumu were already there, sitting around a round table. On the table, there were all kinds of high-grade tea and snacks lingering in the air. And behind each of these 3 people, there was a girl in white quietly serving them. Any one of them was a Taoist master of the King Pill. Wang Lu was shocked. "Qianghua, even if you want to pretend, you should know when to stop. Finding 4 Taoist masters of the King Pill to be your maids? Showing off how many people there are in Xingjing sect. Next time I'll find a supreme-level powerhouse to be your chef. Are you afraid?" Qianghua said, "According to the rules of our sect, the formal meeting of the lead disciples of the 5 uniques should be treated like this." "I'm surprised, Taoist Master Wang Lu. Don't you realize that you represent one of the 5 super sects of the Wanxian League, so the standard of treatment doesn't depend on your cultivation base?" Wang Lu gave a tit for tat. "What a joke. Is the standard of treatment determined by the level of the waiter? How could a King Pill level waiter be better than a Foundation establishment stage waiter? How could they know how to serve tea and observe the situation? That's pure vanity." Qianghua did not show weakness. "That's right, but this is the prevailing rule of the Wanxian League." Wang Lu said, "It's clearly a prevailing bad habit. Doesn't your Xingjing sect claim to be the leader of the Wanxian League? Then hurry up and come up with an 8-point rule or something to get rid of this evil trend. Today, when I was taking a walk down the mountain, a Taoist Master King Pill, an ancient beast in human form, suddenly came over and said that she wants to be my maid. Do you know what I felt at that time? It's like meeting a girl who has lost her footing. How could a beautiful girl lose her footing? Upon hearing this, Yu Mingjun was greatly frightened. Did I lose my footing? I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please forgive me. Wang Lu shook his head. Alas, most of the transformed demon beasts don't understand the ways of the world, and only act with a pure and innocent heart. Some are evil by nature while some are pure and untainted. Senior sister Cheonghua, Mingjun clearly hasn't transformed for a long time, she's as innocent as a child, yet you have the nerve to bully her and make her a maid? Cheonghua didn't speak, but her eyes lightly swept over Yu Mingjun, which made the girl's whole body quiver. TSK, a dignified lead disciple bullying a child, do you have the nerve? Wang Lu took a step forward and stood in front of Yu Mingjun, completely isolating her from the powerful pressure coming from Cheonghua. This child is pleasing to the eye, she reminds me of a junior sister from the same sect who also has a poor IQ. Anyway, she's just a maid in your Shengjing, why not sell her to me, the fated person, cheaply? Taoist Wang Lu, your joke isn't funny? Then you can think of a way to get eczema or something like that, itching to the point that you laugh. After not seeing each other for a few months, the relationship between Wang Lu and Cheonghua was getting worse, especially Wang Lu. The more he looked at Cheonghua, the more he disliked her, and he couldn't wait to change her appearance on the spot. However, before a bigger conflict broke out, Zhou Mumu was already very unhappy and slapped the table. Are you two done? Did you call us here just to watch you fight? Isn't it time to get down to business? Cheonghua smiled and restrained her aura. You're right, but let's wait for Taoist Zai to arrive, then we can get down to business. Wang Lu reached out his hand to touch Yu Mingjun's head to appease the frightened dream taper, and then he sat opposite to Cheonghua. While looking straight at the other party, he reached out his hand to eat the snacks on the table. Hey, since you emphasize the standard treatment, then as the dignified lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, I should have enough food, right? Cheonghua snorted and ignored him. In any case, when Zhan Zai arrived, they could get down to business and no longer need to care about this person. Then she patiently waited for Zhan Zai. This wait lasted for a day and a night. Chapter 451. Cultivators who set foot on the path of immortality usually had a lot of patience. Because of the long lifespan granted to cultivators by the path of immortality, they could do things far more leisurely than mortals. Many cultivators preferred to close themselves up in seclusion, staying in a small and dark cave or palace for decades without leaving. This was enough to make even the most dutiful otaku in the mortal world feel ashamed of their inferiority. As for the chief disciples of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, although each of them became famous very quickly when it came to patience, any one of them was far above the average level of cultivators. However, this time they only waited for a day before they all felt impatient. Having patience and wasting time were two different concepts. As cultivators, they could spend decades to perfect a cultivation method when necessary, but if it was unnecessary to waste time, even a quarter of an hour was too much. Is that idiot Zhan Zai coming or not? Next to the round table, Zhou Mumu impatiently knocked on the corner of the table. And behind her, the king pill level maid very deftly took away the tea and snacks in front of her, and then placed fresh immortal fruits and vegetables on the table. How arrogant, he actually made the 4 of us wait for him for a whole day, and during this time he didn't even send a letter. As Zhou Mumu spoke, she unceremoniously took a dark red fruit and chewed on it. The clear juice flowed down the girl's white wrist, but before it could touch her sleeve, it was evaporated by her magic power. As the chief disciple of Kunlun, this posture of talking while eating obviously did not meet the requirements of etiquette, but waiting for a whole day was enough to wear down all of Zhou Mumu's patience, and she could only use her appetite to suppress the anger in her heart. In this day, the number of immortal fruits Zhou Mumu ate could be measured in tons. Even though Xingjing was rich, the maid serving behind her began to change color. After eating the fruit, Zhou Mumu still could not suppress her anger. Even the famous unruly people like Wang Lu came on time, and he, a mere Zhan Zai, dared to be late. Affected by Zhou Mumu's stray bullet, Wang Lu laughed heartily. Haha, I can't believe that a loser like me has become famous. Cough. Zhou Mumu choked on the fruit juice on the spot. At that moment, Xiang Liang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. We're about to embark on a very high-risk operation, and during the operation an undisciplined teammate will become an extremely unstable factor. I suggest that Zhan Zai be expelled from the team. Xiang Liang's proposal was quite surprising, but it was not difficult to see from his frown that this self-proclaimed soldier hated undisciplined behavior the most. And as a member of a team of 5, Zhan Zai was actually a day late for no reason. Mumu was delighted. Well said, I agree. Just thinking of working with that Edie makes me sick. Wang Lu kindly reminded her, nausea may also be because you ate too much. Mumu glared at her, then picked up a fruit and ate it. At the same time she turned to Qianghua and said, Zhan Zai is late for no reason. We have waited for him for a whole day. We have done our best. Shall we fire him now? Before Qianghua could open her mouth, Wang Lu already said, being late for no reason is not necessarily true. There's another possibility. Mumu frowned. Wasn't the relationship between Zhan Zai and Wang Lu not good? How could he speak for Zhan Zai this time? Then she heard Wang Lu say, it's possible that senior brother Zai has unfortunately died in these 3 months, so it's excusable that he couldn't come. Of course, considering his identity as the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques, if he really died there should have been news about it. But now the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions is calm. Therefore it's also possible that during his cultivation, he fell into a situation where he could neither live nor die. The 10,000 Arts sect tried their best to rescue him, but they could only barely keep his life. At this time, how could he still think about the 5 of us? Thus he had no choice but to stand us up. Mumu was silent for a long time. She even forgot to eat the fruit in her hand. She just stared at Wang Lu and then sighed with emotion. Sure enough, it's still the Wang Lu I know. With that she put down the fruit. Then what do you think? Wang Lu said, there's a proverb in the Western continent. If the mountain doesn't come, I will. Since senior brother Zhan Zai is in a state of near-death emergency treatment, shouldn't we, as his teammates, at least go and lay a wreath or something? With that, Wang Lu took out a ready-made wreath from his mustard seed bag. There were 2 lines of words on both sides. On the left side, lonely without a wife. On the right side, sweet gay afterlife. Mumu was stunned. What kind of messy things are in your mustard seed bag? Did you even prepare a wreath? Wang Lu raised his eyebrows and happily said, actually, I also prepared one for you, senior sister. Don't show it to me. In any case, under the proposal of Wang Lu, the 4 of them decided to go to the 10,000 Arts sect to investigate. It was hard to believe that Zhan Zai had really died. However, at the same time he was not the kind of person who was late for no reason. Although he didn't have any organizational discipline, punctuality was the basic etiquette of a person. As the lead disciple he should be able to do this. Did he really encounter some trouble? Even though Zhan Zai's popularity among the 5 of them was very poor, since he was their teammate they should pay attention to him. Before leaving, Wang Lu made a difficult request to Qianghua. I don't know if I'll come back or not, so I want this little thing as a greeting gift, Wang Lu said and then pointed at Yu Mingjun. The little girl, who had taken human form in the dream, had a terrified and anxious expression on her face. As the fuse that caused the enmity between Wang Lu and Qianghua, she almost couldn't control herself. Qianghua gawked for a moment, and then seriously shook her head. Impossible. Wang Lu then said, then how about we send her to study in Lingjian school as a foreign student? Qianghua was stunned again because she didn't expect Wang Lu to be so persistent with this dream taper. In terms of rarity, although the dream taper also had an ancient bloodline, its bloodline was not pure. At least, compared to the mountain spirit in Lingjian school, it was much worse. In terms of perception it was just above average. Let's talk about it later. This time Qianghua didn't insist. When I come back I will report it to the sect. If it's in the form of a foreign student, perhaps it's okay. Wang Lu cupped his hands in obeisance. Then I'll have to trouble senior sister Qianghua. Qianghua was flattered. When Wang Lu cupped his hands in obeisance, the woman even subconsciously summoned her immortal Du sword to defend herself, because Wang Lu's polite posture was too abnormal. As a matter of fact, Wang Lu also felt that he was very abnormal. Since he saw this Yu Mingjun, his chest felt hot. Of course it was not the heat of puberty, but the faint heat of the red jade pendant hanging on his chest, as if it was reminding him of something. Although the howling Hennessy under his feet didn't open its mouth, Wang Lu judged that this dream taper was probably not as simple as an ancient beast. Unfortunately, the secret of Yu Mingjun's body could only be explored after they returned. For now he had to solve the matter of Zhan Zai first. From Xingjing sect to 10,000 Arts sect, it only took a cup of tea's time. As early as 100 years ago, the rich and overbearing Xingjing sect had established a transportation network that extended in all directions with the help of the 9 regions map. Moreover, it was independent of third-party organizations such as Shunfeng Bank, which was completely under the sole control of Xingjing sect. When needed, Shengjing sect could use this transportation network to send hundreds of experts to any corner of the 9 regions within a cup of tea's time. The terrifying strategy of the 9 regions, which was the leader of the Wanxian League, could be seen. When they arrived at the entrance of 10,000 Arts sect, it was another scene. Different from the grand atmosphere of Shengjing sect, and also different from the independence of Kunlun Immortal World, 10,000 Arts sect was the only one among the 5 unique sects that didn't completely set up their sect's facilities in the mountains. Instead, it was spread out in a valley, and then built many branches around the valley in all directions. According to the 10,000 Arts sect, this was to take advantage of the different terrain environment to facilitate the research of different spells. However, over the years, a large number of spells research had disturbed the surrounding spiritual energy, making other places unsuitable for human survival, except for certain areas. Just by standing in front of the valley, one could feel a unique, repelling aura from thousands of miles away. At the entrance of the valley stood 24 meters tall giant puppets. Their terrifying fluctuations spread out, making the people in front of the entrance disappear without a trace. And these puppets were one of the academic crystallization of 10,000 Arts sect, powerful puppets with the strength of Yuanying stage. Then, Qianghua handed over the visiting card to the gatekeeper puppet. After receiving the letter with the Shengjing sect's logo, the puppet immediately turned around and entered the mountain. Before long, it returned to the entrance of the valley and waved its thick arm to show its welcome. It seems like Zhan Zai is really in the sect. Qianghua said, the visiting card clearly states that we're here to visit Zhan Zai. Now that they've let us pass, it's impossible that he's not here. Wang Lu faintly said, perhaps he's really not here, and the 10,000 Arts sect elders let us see him for the last time. How big of a grudge do you have with Zhan Zai? Zhou Mumu couldn't help but ask. While talking, the 4 of them officially entered the 10,000 Arts sect. After entering the valley, a huge translucent arrow lit up under their feet, which guided them forward. However, throughout the whole journey, no one accompanied them, not even a guiding puppet, completely letting them go. Fortunately, the 4 of them didn't have any other plans. They just followed the direction of the arrow. Along the way, they deeply appreciated the uniqueness of the 10,000 Arts sect. Different from the quiet and elegant title of the Immortal Cultivation World's library, the 10,000 Arts sect presented a noisy atmosphere. Vermilion Bird 400, Azure Dragon 100, White Tiger 600, Black Tortoise 30. First try begin. In the middle of the valley, on one side of the spacious road, several cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect were setting up a tall furnace, which was surrounded by a 4-elements array. Different types of magical power were input into the furnace, which was then condensed into a point through the complex internal structure of the furnace, producing a mysterious and incredible effect. A burst of light flashed, and in the middle of the furnace, a gray iron core slowly condensed out. Ah, failed again. The 29th time I can't even produce a golden core. Is there really a problem with the formula? Try reducing the magical power of the Azure Dragon form to 30. It is said that the probability of producing a golden core would increase. Ridiculous. How could reducing the input increase the output? Several cultivators around the iron furnace incessantly quarreled. A moment later, the contradiction intensified, and their faces turned red. However, to solve the contradiction, the cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect didn't use their fists and feet. Instead, they each fished out a small puppet, activated it with a spell, and then fiercely fought on the ground. Each of those small puppets was made to look like a beautiful girl. Their clothing and appearance were very exquisite. During the fight, their clothes would be damaged from time to time, revealing their underwear and snow-white skin, which caused several cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect to shout and scream. Zhou Mumu watched the whole process, and the corner of her mouth curled up. A group of fools destined to be alone for life. Don't you think so, junior brother Wang Lu? The girl turned her head, intending to get Wang Lu's approval. However, she saw that Wang Lu was staring at those several small puppets, seemingly fascinated. You actually... Chapter 452. It's really a genius invention. In the 10,000 Arts Valley, Wang Lu was still immersed in the scene that he just saw. In his opinion, the props used by several cultivators of 10,000 Arts sect to resolve disputes was simply a genius idea. Hey, are your geniuses so worthless? A few second-rate puppetry skills plus a vulgar aesthetic actually made you, the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, pay so much attention to them? Sure enough, Lingjian school is full of abnormal people. Regarding Wang Lu's enthusiasm, Zhou Mumu could not understand it at all. Wang Lu had long expected this. Although Zhou Mumu had a good relationship with him, it couldn't change the fact that she was, after all, a vulgar person. Therefore Wang Lu just smiled and then asked, "So, in your opinion, what is a genius invention? Those amazingly powerful spells? Or a method that has a particularly fast cultivation speed? But what's the use of those, in addition to creating a few geniuses? For example, our sect's stellar sword method is known as the inheritance of the immortal world, but apart from sect leader and Zhu Shiyao, who else can really bring out the sword method to the extreme? What's the significance of such a method for the entire 9 regions?" Zhou Mumu frowned and wanted to refute, but she didn't know where to start. Wang Lu struck while the iron was hot. The so-called genius invention not only depends on how high the technical content is and how ingenious the creativity is, but also the impact that this creativity may bring. And just now, the puppets used by the several disciples of 10,000 Arts sect almost let me see the coming of a new era. Zhou Mumu said, "Although I don't want to ask, but what kind of new era do you see? A new era where there are no more bloody disputes, no more cruel internal crushing of the sect. Everyone places their contradictions on the cute girls, and under the healing brilliance of the girls, everyone becomes kind." Zhou Mumu was silent for a long time. "Seriously, I think you should find a girlfriend. Although the lead disciples of the 5 uniques generally focus on cultivation, and most of them are single for a long time, but in your current state, if you continue to be single sooner or later, you will be completely abnormal." After Wang Lu reluctantly left the battlefield of the puppet girl, the group continued to move forward in the direction pointed by the arrow. Not long after, there was another commotion ahead. On one side of the road, on top of a pagoda built from 5 elements pure gold, a cultivator of 10,000 Arts sect, who seemed to be low-level foundation establishment, was stepping on 2 grotesquely shaped, rather large boots, and his body was covered with various kinds of unknown talismans. Under the tower, a large group of cultivators of 10,000 Arts sect surrounded a 5-element spirit altar. Some of them poured their magical power into the spirit altar, causing the entire 5 elements fine gold tower to bloom with spiritual light. Some used operators to calculate complex numbers and shouted out the results. There were also some who held a recording jade tablet and kept silent as they faithfully recorded everything. Above the 5-elemental spiritual platform, a king pill stage cultivator was in control of the situation. He was staring at the Foundation Establishment stage cultivator in combat boots. The Foundation Establishment cultivator nodded and gave a thumbs up. The King Pill stage cultivator then said in a loud and clear voice, "Cloud Dragon Boots Test 172 begins now, ignite and launch." The people around the 5-element spirit altar suddenly increased their magical power transmission, and the golden pagoda also burst out in astonishing energy in an instant. The boots of the Foundation Establishment stage cultivator and the pagoda linked, shooting out 2 dazzling beams of light, and he himself, borrowing the recoil force, soared into the sky, breaking through the clouds. The cultivators under the pagoda nervously watched. When the Foundation Establishment stage cultivator broke through the clouds, they hugged each other and cheered. "Ah, it's a success. The Cloud Dragon Boots is a success." Before their voice fell, they heard a muffled bang in the sky, and a shock wave swept through the clouds. Then a meteorite-like brilliance rapidly fell. It was that Foundation Establishment stage cultivator. At this time, one of his boots was missing, and the other one was constantly ejecting colorful light, which seemed very unstable. The flying trajectory of the cultivator was also messy. Before long, he directly rushed to the ground, aiming not far away from Wang Lu and the others. With the ability of a Foundation Establishment stage cultivator, such a high-speed collision would undoubtedly kill him. However, his fellow sect members were indifferent. Instead, they even cast him an excited look, watching him fall to the ground. 10,000 Arts sect is really a group of animals? The 10,000 Arts sect was indifferent, but Zhou Mumu couldn't stand it anymore. She spat out a mouthful of saliva and stamped her foot, causing a clear spring to break through the ground. The clear water formed a soft bed, which perfectly caught the falling Foundation Establishment stage cultivator. Wrapped in the waterbed, the cultivator was dumbfounded. He was at a loss, just like everyone who had just escaped from a great calamity. Zhou Mumu waved her hand. "Humph, no need to thank me." However, before Zhou Mumu could turn around and leave, she heard a roar from behind her. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" It was the Taoist Master King Pill who was in charge of the overall situation on the 5-element spirit platform. He seemed to be between young and middle-aged, and his cultivation time should be continuous. His middle-level King Pill cultivation base and deep background showed that he must have a high position in the 10,000 Arts sect. At this time he was glaring at Zhou Mumu. As a fellow King Pill, although Zhou Mumu was just a low-level newcomer, in addition to the several lead disciples of the 5 uniques, she was not afraid of anyone else, let alone the cultivators of 10,000 Arts sect, who had always been unpleasant to her eyes. "What do you care about?" That Taoist Master King Pill angrily said. "You interfered with our important experiment, and you dare to ask me whether I care or not." The 172nd experiment of the Cloud Dragon Boots was completely scrapped because of your misconduct. What? Is it my responsibility that the broken thing you designed went wrong? Zhou Mumu's anger was also aroused, and she immediately responded with equal harshness. That King Pill showed an impatient expression. Academic research has never been afraid of failure. What I'm afraid of is not being able to learn from failure. Just now, if we let him fall freely, we can get important data from the feedback of the ground, and then adjust the boots for the next experiment. After repeated failures, there will always be a day of success. However, because of your meddling, all the efforts that we have put into this experiment have finally been declared completely useless. Zhou Mumu inexplicably pointed at the Foundation Establishment cultivator on the waterbed. "If I didn't make a move, your junior brother would have turned into a meat patty. You're the meat patty, your whole family is meat patty." While speaking, the Foundation Establishment cultivator whose life was saved stood up to accuse Zhou Mumu. "This experiment is of great importance. The Cloud Dragon Boots is an epic-making invention. My mere life is not worth mentioning at all. Let alone my whole body is covered with protective talismans. Even if all the talismans are ineffective, as long as the experiment is successful, it's enough." Being pointed at and scolded by the person in question, Zhou Mumu was speechless for a long time. Because she really had nothing to say. The girl just inwardly thought that if one day she became the leader of the Wanxian League, the first thing she would do would be to ban the 10,000 Arts sect. Because of the suffocation, Zhou Mumu said to Wang Lu, "The 10,000 Arts sect is really a group of psychopaths, don't you think so?" Who knew that Wang Lu actually shook his head. "I think it was indeed your mistake just now. Senior Sister Zhou, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. We have to learn to respect the values of the 10,000 Arts sect." Zhou Mumu incredulously looked at Wang Lu, and then her eyes gradually became suspicious. "I heard that, in the past, you have a good relationship with a same-sex friend who joined the 10,000 Arts sect, are you?" In any case, that King Pill of the 10,000 Arts sect didn't continue to pester them. Because the preparation for the 173rd experiment was about to begin. Instead of wasting time arguing with a barbarian from Kunlun Immortal World, it was better to put their precious time and energy into more valuable things. When the Cloud Dragon Boots became popular in the 9 regions, the first thing they would do was to print Zhou Mumu's face on the sole of the boots. However, after 2 incidents, the atmosphere of the 10,000 Arts sect was clear at a glance. And after seeing that Foundation Establishment cultivator who didn't hesitate to sacrifice his life for the sake of experimental data, the several lead disciples seemed to have guessed the reason why Zhan Zai was late this time. Sure enough, when they followed the arrow all the way to Zhan Zai's residence, the 4 of them heard Zhan Zai's voice from inside the door. "What are you guys doing here?" His tone was full of impatience, which made Zhou Mumu furious. The girl unceremoniously kicked open the door of Zhan Zai's room. She was about to ask him why he dared to stand them up when she was startled by the scene inside the door and screamed, "You're a pervert." While shouting, Zhou Mumu withdrew from the room. Her left hand held the diamond ring, and her right hand held the blood-marked divine spear, assuming a fighting posture. Inside the room, Zhan Zai was sitting cross-legged naked in the middle of the room. And because he was sitting cross-legged, a certain indecent thing was naturally presented in front of Zhou Mumu's eyes. The girl's temperament was straightforward and bold, but it didn't mean that she was knowledgeable in this regard. Considering that she was full of anger when she broke the door, the change in her mood could be imagined. The fact that she didn't use the blood-marked divine spear to confront him on the spot was already the result of Taoist Master King Pill's self-restraint. Zhan Zai was very calm about this, and he even counterattacked. "What are you yelling for? Don't you have any sense of propriety or shame?" Zhou Mumu scolded, "You, an exhibitionist, do you think you're worthy to talk about propriety? This is my home, what does it have to do with you if I'm willing to expose myself?" Zhan Zai unceremoniously said, "Moreover, don't you feel apologetic to disturb me at the critical time of my experiment?" Sorry? How could you have the face to ask that? You're late for a whole day." Zhan Zai confidently said, "I'm doing an experiment." "What does your experiment have to do with being late?" This experiment is very important. Zhan Zai tried to explain patiently, in order to complete this experiment, I think it's completely understandable to be late for a few days. As long as you have the logical thinking ability of a normal person, you can understand this logic. Zhou Mumu naturally couldn't understand, so she reached out and pushed Wang Lu, who was next to her, forward. You come and talk to him? Wang Lu bluntly smiled and said, Senior Brother Zai, has your eternal tree seed germinated? Chapter 453. Eternal Tree? Hearing Wang Lu's question, Zhou Mumu was taken aback. In the battle for the 5 blood spirit crown, the 5 lead disciples all had their own gains. Some were like Qiong Hua, who sacrificed the blood of hundreds of millions of living beings to the kill immortal sword, and thus had a closer connection with the immortal treasure. Others were like Zhou Mumu, who inherited the blood-marked divine spear, which contained infinite mysteries. Of course, the gains of the 5 were different. For example, Qiong Hua and Wang Lu were the biggest winners, while Zhou Mumu obtained the blood-marked divine spear. As for Zhan Zai, it was gratifying that he had achieved the 10,000 motionless immortal heart realm, but compared with the others he did not gain much. Zhou Mumu was naturally overjoyed, but she did not expect that Zhan Zai, after all, was the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques. How could he be as useless as she thought? He had quietly harvested the seed of the eternal tree. Seeing his secret being exposed, Zhan Zai was a little curious. How did you know? Wang Lu said, because I saw the lush greenery on top of Senior Brother Zai's head, which reminded me of that towering ancient tree. Lush greenery? Zhan Zai inexplicably asked and then carefully looked at it. Is there still a flaw in my cultivation method, causing the aura of the eternal tree to be unable to perfectly integrate? As he spoke, Zhan Zai released more than 300 arithmetic talismans and began to calculate the problem with his cultivation method design, completely ignoring the 4 lead disciples of one of the 5 uniques who had deliberately come here. Well, it has nothing to do with Senior Brother Zai's cultivation method. Wang Lu explained, it's because when I was communicating with my pen friend Hai Yunfan some time ago, he told me that he had recently found a girlfriend. For this reason, I specially gave him a small profit, the Black Jade Diamond Dragon Tiger pill that I personally concocted, and then personally endorsed by the 7th elder of my humble sect. Zhan Zai's eyes lit up. Junior Brother Wang Lu personally concocted this pill? What is its use? What new technology does it use, and what kind of breakthrough does it have compared to other pills? Just like the literal meaning, it makes people as black and hard as the Kunlun slaves. TSK, your focus is completely wrong. I'm talking about Hai Yunfan. Zhan Zai frowned. Junior Brother Yunfan? I haven't seen him for a while, but what does he have to do with my lush greenery? It's nothing. It's just that his new girlfriend is Yi Feifei. Junior sister Yi? Because her cultivation speed can't keep up with mine, we haven't contacted each other for a while. But what does she have to do with the lush greenery? Zhan Zai was still puzzled, his brows tightly knitted together. If it was anyone else who spoke like this, he would have long since determined that this person's intelligence was not worthy of communicating with him. However, when it came to Wang Lu, his heart was filled with fear, and every word and action had to be carefully considered. Little did she know that Wang Lu was already shocked by Zhan Zai at this time. Back then Yi Feifei was infatuated with Zhan Zai, but in the end Senior Brother Zhan did not even have the slightest impression of her. Senior Brother Zai, your sect's 10,000 motionless immortal heart is indeed worthy to be called an immortal-level cultivation method. I'm convinced that besides becoming an immortal, there's probably no other way to cultivate this cultivation method. Wang Lu shook his head. At the same time, I also understand why your sect's female puppet could be invented. Your asexual reproduction technology will mature sooner or later, right? Zhan Zai casually said, there is indeed a main research team that is advancing this project, but forget it, it seems that you don't want to say more about this. In short, my eternal tree has indeed sprouted in my jade mansion. Some time ago, I found that it showed signs of breaking out of the ground, so I put down everything and focused on this. Fortunately, although it was a few days late, there was finally a result. With that, Zhan Zai's face raised a scholarly smile, proud and reserved. Zhou Mumu, on the other hand, couldn't be reserved. She took a step forward and stomped her foot, causing Zhan Zai's residence to tremble. In short, because of your personal affairs, you stood us up for a whole day? Personal affairs? Zhan Zai sneered and said with an expression that said, I don't expect you, a woman from Kunlun immortal world, whose brain has been rigid, to understand the great significance of my academic research. I'll just say one thing. The combination of the eternal tree and my king pill will bring great convenience to our trip to the demon world. Although I'm late for a day, I've made a greater contribution to the team. On the other hand, what else can you do besides arriving at the gathering place on time? Without waiting for Zhou Mumu's anger to erupt, Zhang Zai said, "We previously planned the trip to the demon world, and in these 3 months, we each digested our inheritance. I believe that we've also done special training for the various situations when we encounter the demon race in the future. But have you ever considered a basic question? How can we reach the demon world? The passage between 9 regions and the demon world has long been sealed. Even if there are occasional omissions, it's not something that we, the Taoist master of King Pill, can easily pass through. But I can rely on this eternal tree to find the opportunity to connect the 2 worlds." Zhang Zai said, slightly released the aura of the eternal tree, and then explained, "The eternal tree is the most precious treasure of the demon world. It has the ability to penetrate through the sky and the earth. What we saw in the group of immortal tombs is just a miniature version that has been weakened by God knows how many times. The real eternal tree has the infinite power that is comparable to no beyond a true immortal. And the eternal tree has the ability to sense each of its separated branches, leaves and fruits. And now I've combined the seed of the eternal tree with the king pill, so as a part of the eternal tree, I can summon the main body, and then go against the current to enter the demon world. Of course, in the process I can also take the 4 of you with me. How about it, with my contribution, let alone being late for a day or 2, even if I'm late for a month, so what? Without me, could you guys arrive at the gathering place on time to enter the demon world?" After Zhang Zai fused with the eternal tree, his self-confidence had obviously improved. However, before the smile on his face faded, he heard Zhou Mumu's cold humph. "What are you showing off for? You think you're so great just because you can enter the demon world?" Upon hearing Zhou Mumu's words, Wang Lu suddenly smiled and said, "It seems that without accident, the chances that we got in Kunlun Library are almost the same. The chance to enter the demon world." Qianghua nodded. "There are hundreds of millions of souls of the demon world in the Kill Immortal Sword, and it's natural for the souls of the demon world to return to the demon world. I can open the endless void, and then use the souls of the demon world as a guide to go to the demon world." Xiang Liang let out a sound of agreement. Although he didn't explain it, it also supported Wang Lu's speculation. He also got the chance to go to the demon world in the library. Wang Lu said, "It seems that whether it's South Pole Immortal Wang or Dixian in the group of immortal tombs, they don't seem to be very optimistic that the 5 of us can come together. Therefore, each of them gave the chance to go to the demon world so as not to concentrate the key to the door in one person's hand. As a result, because of various reasons, the 5 of us can't gather in the demon world. At the same time, this shows that they are determined to make us go to the demon world. However, being able to have the seed of the eternal tree and become a part of the eternal tree is still a very important achievement. Once we enter the demon world, we can use this to conceal our human aura and avoid unnecessary disputes." No matter how strong the lead disciples of the 5 uniques were, it was impossible for them to fight head-on with the local people in the demon world alone. The strength of Taoist Master King Pill was not that high. Once he encountered the demon king of the demon world, let alone the 5 lead disciples, even 50 of them would not be enough to be killed by the other party. Therefore, being able to become a local creature of the demon world was indeed a very important thing. Did you hear that? The barbarian woman of Kunlun sect? With the support of Wang Lu and the others, Zhang Zai's arrogance was even more flourishing. His eyes were filled with disdain as if he wanted to trample Zhou Mumu under his feet. How could Zhou Mumu bear it? Seeing that the 2 of them were about to fight, Wang Lu reached out to stop Zhou Mumu. "Senior Sister Zhou, the overall situation is important." Zhou Mumu was not polite at all. "Why don't you let him think about the overall situation?" Wang Lu glanced at Zhang Zai with pity in his eyes, and then whispered to Zhou Mumu about the story between Hai Yunfan Yi Feifei and Zhang Zai. In just a few words, Zhou Mumu's anger dissipated, and her face was full of smiles. "Haha, no wonder you said he was overflowing with green. It turns out there's such a story. Well, why bother with this kind of person who is doomed to be alone for a lifetime? I'll let him have it this time." Wang Lu cupped his hands across his chest. Senior Sister Zhou is really magnanimous. Zhang Zai was inexplicable. When he heard Zhou Mumu mention that he was doomed to be alone for a lifetime, it seemed like she was praising him as a genius, unparalleled in the 9 regions, seeking defeat alone. But looking at her sarcastic and compassionate smile, he felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell what it was. After thinking about it, Zhang Zai felt that with his talent, Why should he bother to understand the thinking of the Kunlun barbarian? She could say whatever she wanted to say. This kind of barbaric and rude person would only be left with the secular life of being a good wife and educating children. However, thinking of her barbaric and rude behavior, which completely did not meet the traditional requirements of virtue for a woman in 9 regions, she probably wouldn't be able to get married. This is what it means to be truly doomed to be alone for a lifetime. Thinking of this, Zhang Zai cast a victorious look at her. Zhou Mumu naturally did not show any weakness and responded with the same victorious look. Wang Lu frowned. Why don't you two stay together? In any case, since Zhang Zai had provided an acceptable reason for being late, the 4 of them did not intend to be entangled for too long. After all, the plan to go to the demon world could not be delayed. Except for Wang Lu, the other 4 didn't even completely explain the trip to the demon world to their sections. This gathering was also invited by Qianghua in her own name, saying that she wanted to hold a small gathering. Then, the elders of the various sects thought that it was not a bad thing to deepen the relationship between the 5 uniques, so they allowed it. If the time dragged on, it would inevitably cause trouble. Therefore, after some discussion, it was decided that Zhang Zai would personally open the passage to the demon world. As for the location, naturally, it could not be chosen in the 10,000 Arts sect, because once the aura of the eternal tree spread, it was likely to lead to unnecessary trouble. Although the great war of immortal and demon had ended more than 2,000 years ago, it was rumored that many reclusive cultivators had been lurking in the deep mountains and forests, vigilant against the counterattack of the demon race. If they rashly released the eternal tree, it was likely that they would be regarded as spies of the demon world and would be beheaded. That group of old guys was not inferior to South Pole Immortal One, so it was not unusual for them to be killed. After discussing for a while, they could not come to a conclusion. Finally, it was Qianghua who made the final decision. I have an immortal cave in the southern heaven region, which is the spiritual energy node of the feng shui line. The spiritual energy outside the immortal cave rapidly changes, which should be able to conceal the aura of the eternal tree. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu's eyes were almost blinded. Immortal cave in the southern heaven region? Moreover, it's the spiritual energy node of the feng shui line? This is enough to establish a sect. Where did you get such a mansion? Qianghua faintly smiled. When I became the King Pill, the mysterious sky mansion gave it to me as a gift to sow good karma. Wang Lu gritted his teeth and then smiled. Mysterious sky mansion? We've become enemies. Chapter 454. Don't worry about scarcity, worry about inequality. The relationship between Wang Lu and the mysterious sky mansion has always been good. Not only did he have a VIP account, the cooperation between the Intelligence Revenue Service and the Mysterious Sky Mansion has also been increasing in recent years. Therefore, every festival, the Mysterious Sky Mansion would send people to send gifts. Some were local specialties, some were meticulously made, and although not powerful, they were all kinds of interesting magical tools. Wang Lu has always praised the Mysterious Sky Mansion's service awareness. For the lead disciple of the 5 uniques, wealth in the general sense has no meaning, and with the sect's resources, it was not surprising for them to receive spiritual treasures and even immortal treasures. The advantage of the Mysterious Sky Mansion compared to the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League was nothing more than their large number of people. They were spread all over the 9 regions, so it was more convenient to collect local specialties from some remote areas. And the Mysterious Sky Mansion just happened to play this comparative advantage. Every time they could send Wang Lu a gift. All along, Wang Lu was deeply satisfied with this, especially compared to the treatment of him and his master in the Mysterious Sky Mansion. It was like heaven and earth. Taoist Master Wang Wu has long been blacklisted by the Mysterious Sky Mansion because of excessive loans. Considering that she was an elder of the 5 uniques, the amount owed was not too much, so the Mysterious Sky Mansion was too lazy to care about it. However, every year they would send a bill to remind someone that they still owed a lot of spirit stones, which made Wang Wu very annoyed. Wang Lu has always been proud of his VIP treatment, but now, right in front of him, a woman from Xingjing sect, named Qianghua, who was as incompatible as fire and water with him, actually showed off in such a blatant way that his dog eyes hurt. Mysterious Sky Mansion actually gave Qianghua a set of Southern Heaven Immortal Cave to celebrate her promotion to King Pill? It was just a mere Qianghua. Was it necessary? Was it that rare? Take Lu Li as an example. In terms of age, Qianghua was a few years older than Lu Li, obviously an old woman. In terms of appearance, although the two were objectively on par, Qianghua had a lofty and repulsive face, so her appearance index must be reduced by half. In terms of figure, Qianghua could also be considered as curvaceous, but the two on her chest could only be compared to Lu Li's. In terms of IQ, Lu Li was even more superior. What was the use of a woman as smart as Qianghua? In terms of cultivation base, Qianghua was half a step ahead. However, Lu Li was also on the verge of a breakthrough. With her brilliant sword heart, once she advanced to the King Pill stage, she would basically lock the title of #1 in terms of attack power among her peers. On this point, even Wang Lu, who had primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi, had to admit that he was somewhat inferior to her. Therefore, in summary, Qianghua was nothing but the kill immortal sword. How could a good-for-nothing person enjoy the South Heaven Immortal Cave? Those grandsons of the mysterious Sky Mansion only knew how to give him some toys that didn't hurt him, but they were willing to give Qianghua a villa. Was Qianghua a mistress of the mysterious Sky Mansion? Unfortunately, the important matter of going to the demon world was more important, so Wang Lu had no time to consider how to protest against the differential treatment of the mysterious Sky Mansion. Since Qianghua had proposed a suitable place, the five of them flew in the air using their respective magical treasures. In order to avoid attracting attention, the more convenient and faster Xingjing sex transportation network could not be used. Along the way, in order to maintain team harmony, the five of them deliberately spent a lot of effort. Because Wang Lu and Qianghua were hostile to each other, the two of them naturally could not stick together. Zhou Mumu and Zhan Zai were like fire and water, so they had to be separated. As for Xiang Liang, it didn't matter. However, his relationship with anyone was relatively cold. His cold face seemed to keep everyone at a distance. Therefore, this flight process was really awkward. Initially, Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu were companions, talking and laughing wittily, but the other three simply couldn't group up. Zhan Zai looked down on the barbarians of the royal soldier sect, but his relationship with Qianghua was quite delicate after the five spirits' power struggle. Qianghua was a person with the temperament of a leader. As long as she took the initiative to come forward, it was not difficult to coordinate the relationship between the several people. However, with the presence of Wang Lu, she didn't want to be too conspicuous so as to avoid trouble. Therefore, in addition to Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu, the other three people unexpectedly ignored each other and remained silent. This team state, let alone sincere cooperation, seemed like they were going to disband at any time. If it was only this, then it was fine. However, after flying for a while, Zhan Zai couldn't bear the loneliness anymore. Especially when he saw Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu laughing all the way, he secretly frowned. Among these five people, the only one who could make him feel like a confidant was Wang Lu. Although their relationship was not good, Zhan Zai was more afraid of Wang Lu. Zhan Zai despised Zhou Mumu, but he very much agreed with Wang Lu. Therefore, when he saw the two of them talking and laughing all the way, he thought, this Zhou Mumu really knows how to climb high branches. Knowing that her intelligence is low, she looked for a strong person like Wang Lu. She actually knows how to use a woman as a weapon. But I won't let her get away with it so easily. Wang Lu's precious time should not be squandered on a woman with an empty brain. The one who is really worth his time to talk to is me, Zhan Zai. Thinking of this, Zhan Zai made a decision. He flew directly to Wang Lu's side, completely ignoring the conversation between Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu, and very stiffly interjected, Wang Lu, I have a question to discuss with you. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu gawked for a moment, but then he immediately guessed Zhan Zai's mind and almost laughed on the spot. However, Zhou Mumu was not so easy to talk to. She stared at him with her pretty eyes. Who the F***ck are you? Zhan Zai simply ignored her. He just looked at Wang Lu seriously and then put on a formal smile. This question is about my 10,000 Arts Sect's 4 phases pill condensation technique. You should have seen my junior brothers and sisters use it on the way here. At present, it seems that the result of this spell is highly random. You use the same amount of magical power input, but the result can't be determined. Regarding this, before he could finish his question, he was angrily interrupted by Zhou Mumu. Moreover, the way the girl interrupted him was particularly direct. The blood-marked divine spear was placed vertically in front of Zhan Zai, and the girl coldly said, "Get lost." Zhan Zai was also angry, thinking, this woman, I give you face but you don't want it? Thereupon he also activated his lightning body. Seeing that the dispute was imminent, Wang Lu sighed. Sure enough, you two should be together. Every time you meet it's like a thunderstorm. How about this, you two fight first? As long as you don't lose your life and don't cause irreparable damage, you can fight however you want until the outcome is decided. Then, the winner will have to admit whatever the loser says. That's exactly what I want. The two of them said in unison, and then the fight officially began. The blood-marked divine spear and the lightning body fought each other, stirring up a storm. Interestingly, the two of them were fighting while hurrying on their way because Wang Lu and Xianghua would not stop and wait for them. After noticing this, Zhou Mumu rushed to change her tactic. Instead of trying to hurt the opponent, she just wanted to trap the opponent so that Zhang Zai would fall behind. Of course, she didn't really want to exclude him from the team. After all, they still needed to count on his eternal tree to go to the demon world. However, as long as she could stall him once, how could Zhang Zai, who would rush over later, say that he didn't lose? And as long as he admitted defeat, then. Since Zhou Mumu had such a plan, Zhang Zai's plan was of course similar. Therefore, the spells that the two of them used were mainly to delay. Sometimes, Zhang Zai would draw the ninth heaven thunder and draw the thunder lock cage. Sometimes, Zhou Mumu would use the diamond ring to bind the space, wanting to take Zhang Zai into the ring. The fight was wonderful and eye-opening. Then, taking advantage of this opportunity, the bored Wang Lu found Xiang Liang and began to discuss military issues with the latter. As soon as Wang Lu opened his mouth, Xiang Liang's eyes began to shine. This was the field he was most interested in. In addition, Wang Lu's attainments in the military field also made Xiang Liang particularly satisfied. Very good, but compared to a real expert such as himself, there was still a gap. This gave Xiang Liang a lot of room to play. The two could discuss any problem, and every time they discussed, Xiang Liang could show his strong points. From time to time, Wang Lu would burst out with inspiration, which made Xiang Liang often feel enlightened. This kind of exchange simply made Xiang Liang feel refreshed, and he even remembered a legendary story he heard in the royal soldier sect. It was a story that Xiang Liang accidentally heard when several outer court disciples were secretly chatting. They were discussing a strange creature called a woman. They said that men and women could obtain great pleasure through an act called sexual intercourse. Even the pleasure of advancing to a higher realm and winning a war could not compare to the pleasure of intercourse between a man and a woman. At that time, Xiang Liang snorted disdainfully, "Are you kidding me? Is there anything more pleasurable in the world than winning a war and advancing in cultivation base? That's because you haven't been promoted much and you haven't won many battles, right?" A group of unworthy outer court disciples. But now Xiang Liang suddenly remembered that story. Of course, it was not because he had any bad intentions toward Wang Lu, although he had also heard the story of a certain stellar fairy. The main reason was that Xiang Liang suddenly discovered that there seemed to be some things in the world that were comparable to the pleasure of advancing in cultivation and winning a war. This almost refreshed Xiang Liang's worldview. It made him surprised and greatly changed his view of Wang Lu. Previously, their short exchange in the 5 Blood Spirit Crown competition only gave Xiang Liang a preliminary understanding of Wang Lu. But now, he felt that his understanding of Wang Lu was still insufficient. No one had told him before that Wang Lu was such an interesting person. People only said that Wang Lu was a wonderful flower in the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions, and that no one could match his talent and strategy, but no one said that chatting with him would make people so happy. Seeing Xiang Liang's eyes getting brighter and brighter, Wang Lu also sneered in his heart. Sure enough, this kind of young virgin's favorability was the easiest to brush. If one wanted to brush the favorability of a young virgin, there were only 2 ways: talk and talk. One was to talk and the other was to talk in detail. And now, Wang Lu was fully using his eloquence to brush Xiang Liang's favorability all the way until it almost broke the surface. Wang Lu was very clear about the principle of having more friends, but in his opinion, most people did not have the qualification to be friends. However, the lead disciples of the 5 uniques were undoubtedly the ones who could be friends. And in this trip to the demon world, this flight was the last relaxing time. The 5 lead disciples were all battle-hardened, so they had long been prepared for the battle, so there was no need to sharpen their spears at the last minute. Since there was nothing to do along the way, it was better to brush the favorability of the lead disciples. In fact, Wang Lu had long locked on Xiang Liang as his target. Unfortunately, he had been busy chatting with Zhou Mumu and had no time to spare. Thanks to Zhang Zai's timely intervention, Wang Lu was freed. Looking at the 2 people who were still fighting behind him, Wang Lu's smile was even brighter. "The 2 of you shall be together forever." Chapter 455. After half a day, a group of 5 people, 2 of whom were injured, finally arrived at the Immortals' Cave in the southern heaven region. Qionghua's Immortal Cave was located in a beautiful place, with a floating island floating in the middle of the mountains. Below the floating island was a ring. A magnificent ring. Outside the ring was a mirror-like lake. The surface of the water reflected layers of verdant mountains, like a paradise on earth. However, at the edge of the ring, the situation took a sharp turn. Sleep seemed to have been neatly cut by a knife. The terrain suddenly fell steeply, and the flat surface of the lake turned into a cliff. The lake water surged down, forming a ring-shaped waterfall. After the turbulent water fell for thousands of feet, it gathered in one place, and the powerful momentum caused the water to shatter like mist. The floating island was shrouded in mist, like a huge steamer, using steam to support the floating island. However, compared to this magnificent natural scene, the intense changes in heaven and earth's spiritual chi here were more worthy of attention. The circular waterfall around the floating island had a strange gravitational force, causing the heaven and earth spiritual chi here to be abnormally active. Not only the water spiritual chi, but the other four attributes of spiritual chi also existed between heaven and earth. Moreover, they were evenly distributed, mixing and blending with each other, vibrating fiercely, mincing all kinds of energy and forming a natural barrier. Cultivating in seclusion in this kind of environment, there was no need to worry about the fluctuation of magical power spreading out, and there was no need to worry about being disturbed by someone who happened to pass by. This was because outside of the circular waterfall, the mirror-like lake had the effect of concealing all changes and diverting the attention of outsiders. To put it simply, under normal circumstances, unless one knew about this place beforehand, they would unconsciously divert their attention elsewhere, unable to lock onto this floating island. Furthermore, the higher one's cultivation was, the easier it was for a cultivator to be misled by the spiritual chi in the earth veins. If it were not for Cheonghua's special artifact leading the way, the group would not have been able to reach this place. At the same time, the dramatic changes in this place could also be called the wonder of the 9 regions. The drastic changes in the surrounding spiritual energy were infinitely useful to the talented cultivators, and many magical techniques could be cultivated with the help of this. This was a true heavenly sanctuary, a treasure land that was more than enough for a middle-rank academy to establish. At the same time, it was also a gift from the mysterious sky mansion to Cheonghua for the King Pill. We're here. This is my cave abode. It's been a long journey. Let's go in and have a rest. Next to the floating island, Cheonghua said lightly. Her eyes were indifferent, without any intention of showing off. However, by chance her gaze fell on Wang Lu. The latter frowned and his eyes flickered. After a long time, when Cheonghua had some doubts, he suddenly spoke. Senior apprentice Sister Cheonghua, are you selling this house? 30 million spirit stones, what do you think? 40 million? Cheonghua helplessly said, I think these things should at least wait until we come back. Wang Lu said confidently, I'm afraid that if you die in the demon world, the mysterious sky mansion will take back this item. It won't be easy for me to buy it at a low price. Cheonghua shook her head and did not discuss this with Wang Lu. She just waved her hand and opened a gap in the natural barrier formed by the circular waterfall. Let's go. The 5 of them entered the floating island one after another and rested in the island's exquisite courtyard to replenish their magic power. Then, led by Cheonghua, they flew to the bottom of the floating island. Below the floating island was the rising mist of the circular waterfall. Cheonghua pointed at the center of the mist. Junior apprentice brother Zai, you just need to plant the eternal tree here. However, Zhan Zai was not assured. He summoned out hundreds of calculation talismans, and after carefully calculating it, reluctantly nodded. Transplanting an eternal tree that had been rooted in the King Pill was a matter of life and death for a cultivator. Even in common sense, it was simply a fantasy. Fortunately, Zhan Zai was a disciple of the 10,000 Arts sect, so he was able to calculate this possibility through his own unique algorithm. However, the difficulty was very high, and the environmental requirements were also extremely harsh. No matter how proud Zhan Zai was of his method, he would not joke around with his life. Next, Zhan Zai laid an array under the island and began to transplant the eternal tree. The other 4 lead disciples guarded him from the side. Each of them operated the King Pill to filter the surrounding spiritual energy so that Zhan Zai, who was in the middle, could breathe the purest air. The surrounding spiritual energy filtered by the 4 top-quality King Pills was a natural supplement. Zhan Zai didn't even need to deliberately operate his method. With one breath, the King Pill in his Jade Mansion would be filled with inexhaustible magical power. And he himself was able to focus on the eternal tree transplant. On the first day, Zhan Zai sat cross-legged in mid-air, supported by a floating futon. He devoted all his energy to absorbing the pure spiritual energy provided by the 4 lead disciples. One day later, the King Pill in his Jade Mansion expanded 10 times, and its magical power was almost violent. For the cultivators of the King Pill, overcharging the King Pill with spiritual energy was a naked suicide. Usually, A cultivator only needed to inject 1.5 times the amount of spiritual energy to make the king pill explode. Zhang Zai's 10 times pressure was simply an eye-opener. However, only in this environment could he really begin to transplant the eternal tree. The green light in the king pill began to grow rapidly under the washing of the excessive spiritual energy. The next day Zhang Zai was still sitting in mid-air, but the futon under him had disappeared. Because from the pores on his body, countless fine roots of the eternal tree spread out and took root at the bottom of the waterfall. And under the nourishment of the waterfall, these tens of thousands of roots supported Zhang Zai's body. On the third day, Zhang Zai's position had been replaced by a towering ancient tree. A giant tree with a waist of more than 300 meters was suspended in mid-air. The tens of thousands of roots that supported it were no longer fine and difficult to see with the naked eye, but rather unusually thick channels. These channels were responsible for the close connection between the eternal tree and the ring-shaped waterfall. The tens of thousands of channels intertwined into a net, almost covering the ring-shaped waterfall. And looking up along the roots, originally, Zhang Zai was sitting quietly under the floating island, only several hundred meters away from the bottom of the island. According to the growth speed of the eternal tree, the crown would soon reach the island. However, at this time, when the eternal tree began to take shape, looking up from below, the floating island seemed to have disappeared. Because the space channel had been opened by the eternal tree. If seen from a distance, the bottom of the floating island was like a black hole, and most of the thick trunk of the eternal tree was submerged in the black hole. Inside the black hole, the cold wind whistled, bringing with it an uncomfortable smell. It was the smell of the demon world. The 4 lead disciples of the 4 protectors looked solemnly at the black hole above their heads. Although they had been looking forward to this scene for a long time, witnessing it with their own eyes was still incredible. The channel through the 2 worlds was actually opened. According to Zhang Zai's theory, this was the summon of the demon world's eternal tree to its branch, which was the instinctive reaction of the eternal tree. However, just an instinctive reaction of the eternal tree could tear the space and open the space seal that was finally laid by the 9 regions cultivators in the past? It seemed that a life form beyond the level of true immortal was not an unfounded fantasy. However, thinking that there was such a terrifying life form in the demon world, how could they not be deeply worried? In the 5 blood spirit crown power struggle, although Zhang Zai's plan to make the eternal tree stand tall on the ground was only a part of the immortal dreamland of the group of immortal tombs, who could guarantee that there was no powerful person in the real demon world who could do this. Tens of thousands of years ago in the first great war of immortals and demons, the 9 regions, which was in its heyday, was set off a reign of terror by the demon race, which fully illustrated the power of the demon race. And for thousands of years, heroes emerged in large numbers in 9 regions, which could give birth to heroes like Immortal Qin and Great Ancestor Dishing. Could it be that the demon world could not have a ghost beast king? Once the eternal tree was really used, perhaps there would be a force of the same level in 9 regions that could compete with it. However, how serious would the collision of these 2 forces bring to 9 regions? I feel more and more that this trip to the demon world should not be delayed. Zhou looked extremely serious. Xiang Liang nodded silently, and his murderous intent gradually revealed itself. However, Wang Lu said, "I want to call for help." Xianghua shook her head. You should be very clear that the more people involved in this trip to the demon world, the more efficient it is. Moreover, this passage does not allow too strong an individual to pass through. The level of King Pill is almost the limit. Wang Lu said, I happen to know a King Pill level B** Tisich, who is very suitable to be used as cannon fodder, cannon in various senses. Qianghua sighed and no longer paid attention to Wang Lu. She lightly said, let's go. With that, she flew into the black hole first. Wang Lu chuckled and followed closely behind. Zhou Mumu and Xiang Liang followed side by side. The next moment, the eternal tree, which was deeply rooted in the ring-shaped waterfall and nourished by the waterfall, suddenly abandoned all its roots and disappeared under the strong gravitational force behind the black hole. That terrifying black hole slowly closed, and countless spots of starlight flickered in it, like pairs of covetous and longing eyes. Behind the passage was a blood-red world. This was a world that was not unfamiliar to people. At the last moment of the battle for the 5 blood spirit crown, when Qianghua unleashed the Kill Immortal Sword and launched a world-breaking blow, the world changed color and all living things declined. The camouflage that was attached to that world was broken, and everything was revealed. Harmony River, Flaming Valley, Golden City, Gray Mountain, were not beautiful places, but the ugly and cruel land of the demon world for the people of 9 regions. And then, it looked like what they saw in front of them. Is this the demon world? After coming out of the passage, Zhou Mumu's eyes widened and she softly asked, "This is the demon world?" Behind her, Zhan Zai affirmed. At this time he had just returned to his human form from the eternal tree and looked very weak. However, he stubbornly refused Xiang Liang's offer of help, proudly stood alone, and commented on the scene in front of him. Whether it is the composition of the soil under the feet or the smell of the air, they all confirm with many records that this is the demon world. His voice was weak but firm. However, just as he said that, a cold wind blew. Zhan Zai involuntarily trembled and sneezed. What he spurted out was black blood. Chapter 456. Zhu. After a crisp sneeze, Zhan Zai absent-mindedly looked at the black blood on his palm. The 4 lead disciples around him also cast their eyes on him. "Junior brother Zai, did you get hurt when you transplanted the eternal tree?" Qianghua earnestly asked. Zhan Zai didn't answer. He just looked solemnly and scanned his body with his primordial spirit to confirm his physical condition. Everything was fine, there was nothing unusual. It was as if the black blood that he just spurted out didn't belong to him. If not for the clear evidence on his palm, he would even suspect that it was an illusion. At this time another cold wind blew. This time not only Zhan Zai, even Zhou Mumu couldn't help but sneeze. However, she didn't spurt out blood. It was just that after the girl covered her mouth and nose with her hand, she saw that there was a layer of mucus on her palm. "What is this?" Puzzled, Zhou Mumu shook her hand to get rid of the thick liquid droplets. Then she also scanned her body with her primordial spirit, but nothing unusual happened. However, at the same time Wang Lu's face suddenly changed. This scene was so familiar. 3 months ago, when he received the Elder's rotation training on Spirit Sword Mountain, the first lesson that the 6th Elder gave him seemed to be this scene. It was a strange poison from the demon world. After being poisoned, everything seemed to be normal. No matter what method was used to scan the body, it would show that everything was normal. However, the whole body was constantly melting. The poison was so penetrating that even the non-phase golden body could not resist it. At the same time, no elixir could work, and only a special detoxification method could be used to survive. At that time Wang Lu still thought, giving me such a sharp poison in the first lesson is just a show of strength, isn't it a bit boring? However, in the next 3 months, the endless difficulties of the 6th Elder finally made Wang Lu realize what it meant by there is heaven beyond heaven and hell difficulty. In those 3 months, Wang Lu felt like he had degenerated from a spirit stone adventurer to a free adventurer, which was simply too horrible to look at. However, it was also because of those 3 months of special training that he made the correct response in the first place. Everyone except for Qianghua, immediately activate your healing techniques and circulate them at full power. Do not hold back, this is a matter of life and death. At this time, even without Wang Lu saying anything, they had already guessed that they were poisoned. Although they did not know who poisoned them, the symptoms were beginning to appear, and the consequences seemed to be very serious. Zhou Mumu's cheeks had obviously begun to melt. But no matter what method he used to investigate, he couldn't find the source of the problem. The few chief disciples who were used to seeing storms couldn't help but feel their hairs stand on end. Fortunately, it seemed that Wang Lu was very experienced in this. The only problem was, why apart from senior sister Qianghua? Zhou Mumu tried her best to operate the Kunlun longevity technique, trying to slow down the melting of her body, while looking at Qianghua with an unconvinced expression. Qianghua's strength was above her, this point she admitted, but that was because she was not good at frontal combat. When it came to longevity, as the lead disciple of the oldest sect in 9 regions, she was confident that she would not lose to anyone. Even Wang Lu's non-phase golden body could not be compared with the secret method of Kunlun sect in terms of poison avoidance, exorcism, and longevity. So why was Qianghua superior? At the same time, Qianghua was also curious as to why she was different. Although her symptoms were slightly lighter than the others, the fine beads of sweat on her forehead showed that her condition was not optimistic. As a result, Wang Lu's answer almost caused Zhou Mumu's method to go astray. Because I don't feel distressed if she dies. Qianghua secretly sighed and immediately operated the Xingjing immortal method, using the 3-in-1 technique to highly condense her body. Next, the 4 lead disciples tried their best to delay the corrosion of the poison, while Wang Lu, after stabilizing his own condition, began to detoxify the poison for the other 4. The method used was exactly the same as the one taught by Elder Lu Li. In fact, there was no room for error. Lu Li's detoxification technique was completely piled up with human lives, and so far the principle of it could not be analyzed. And since the principle could not be analyzed, it could not be changed in the slightest. The magical power output rhythm and attribute combination must be accurate to the point that it would stun the common king pill. In particular, it must be calculated through a set of very complex formulas for the poisoned person. This kind of thing was difficult for the common Taoist master of Yuanying stage, and there were not many people in 9 regions who could do it in the king pill stage. Therefore at this time the several lead disciples were glad to have a teammate like Wang Lu. Otherwise, when the super elite team of 5 lead disciples arrived in the demon world, before they even had the time to encounter the enemy, they would be blown to death by a gust of chilly wind. This was probably the most shameful scene that the people of 9 regions encountered since the end of the Great War of Immortal and Demon. But then again, if it weren't for the fact that the 5 of them had a tacit understanding before they separated at Kunlun Mountain that they would perform their respective duties in the next action, the preparation work of the other 4 in the past 3 months would also be adjusted, so that they would not be defenseless against the sudden poison. Among the 5 of them, Wang Lu was the best at defense. Therefore his position in the team was the defender, and the work of resisting external damage was the responsibility of Wang Lu. This chilly wind came so suddenly that Wang Lu was unprepared for it. Because before this, Elder Lu Li also said that this kind of body-melting poison was intentional, not the natural scenery of the demon world. No matter how cruel the demon world was, it would not be so lifeless. According to the available information, the last time a cultivator from 9 regions entered the demon world was more than 1,000 years ago. During this period, the situation in the demon world changed, so it was reasonable for people to be caught off guard. Therefore Wang Lu couldn't do it. But in any case, since Wang Lu couldn't isolate the damage in the first place, then he must participate in the next step of the emergency measures. Because in theory he was the first person to come into contact with the source of danger. Zhou Mumu's auxiliary method was very strong. When the Kunlun longevity technique was operated to the limit, it could even bring the dead back to life. However, her activation speed was not fast enough. If Zhou Mumu was prepared in advance, she could also solve this poison with all her strength. But now she could only hand it over to Wang Lu, and this task must be completed by Wang Lu. Half an hour later, Wang Lu successfully removed the poison from the body of the last person. How do you feel? Is there any internal organ that has been irreparably damaged, such as the uterus or ovaries, or the King Pill Jade Mansion that has been fundamentally destroyed? Or is there an ugly scar on your skin that can't be removed, causing you to be disfigured for life? As Wang Lu faintly asked, he retracted his hand a bit. 4 of his 5 fingers had already moved away from the back of the person in front of him. Fortunately, I'm all right. Qianghua nodded her head and got up to leave. Tieske, I think there's still a problem with the treatment just now. Some of the remaining poison is stubborn and entrenched in the body. Wait for me to circulate my magical power to remove the remaining poison for you. With that, Wang Lu's 4 fingers circulated the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi and pressed it again. Even if Qianghua used her elbow to think, she already knew what he was planning. She faintly smiled and then her figure flashed away. Wang Lu didn't pursue her and just dispersed the sword qi on his fingertips. Wang Lu had always been very unhappy with Qianghua. This was deeply rooted in his heart when Qianghua sacrificed the blood of hundreds of millions of people to the kill immortal sword in the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown. Later, he randomly punched her in the face, venting part of the unhappiness in his heart and waiting for Qianghua to change. A stubborn and arrogant Qianghua who regarded the rise and fall of the entire continent as her own responsibility must be suppressed by the cruelest means. And if Qianghua could change a little, Wang Lu didn't mind making friends with a senior sister Qianghua whose strength was on the same level as his own. Unfortunately, when they met again, Wang Lu felt a deeper stubbornness from Qianghua. Although Qianghua didn't say it explicitly, Wang Lu could feel the killing intent in her heart. Therefore, along the way he constantly found fault with her, making his attitude clear. However, it was understandable for cultivators to slay demons and eliminate devils. Not to mention that this time, Qianghua didn't sacrifice hundreds of millions of people. Therefore Wang Lu couldn't say anything. What's more, in this trip to the devil realm, Qianghua's strength was indispensable. Therefore, even if Qianghua was not pleasing to the eye, he wouldn't drag the team down. Although Qianghua's detoxification work was the last, it was also because her cultivation was the highest, and the 3 of them were the most stable. As for trying to use the primal chaos sword qi after the detoxification, if Qianghua really couldn't avoid such a small trick, it could only mean that her IQ had dropped to the point where she couldn't be a member of the team, and she deserved to be kicked out of the team. In any case, under the efforts of Wang Lu, the team of lead disciples finally returned to normal. However, the experience just now made the several lead disciples feel a chill in their hearts. It was just a chilly wind. In the silence, Xiang Liang was the first to speak. Although he had also experienced a life-and-death crisis, there was not the slightest fluctuation on his face. Instead, he seriously asked, "What should we do next?" In the team, Xiang Liang's task was to act as a commander-in-chief. He was a qualified commander and an excellent soldier. He was not afraid of death, had a strong explosive force, and was willing to obey orders. The only question was, whose order was it? The object of Xiang Liang's question was Qianghua. In fact, the relationship between Xiang Liang and Qianghua was not good. At least, it was far less than his friendship with Wang Lu. Moreover, compared to Qianghua, Wang Lu also had the leadership ability of a small team. On this point, whether it was in terms of battle record or theory, Wang Lu had the advantage. However, Xiang Liang still chose Qianghua. The reason was very simple, because Qianghua represented the Shengjing sect, which was the leader of the Wanxian League. For Xiang Liang, who was accustomed to the social hierarchy, this reason was enough. Qianghua was also blunt. Upon hearing Xiang Liang's question, she stretched out her hand and pointed in a direction. There should be something we're looking for. In fact, no one had ever made it clear why the five of them came to the demon world together, but they all had a tacit understanding. After Qianghua pointed in the direction, Wang Lu did not object, because the red jade pendant on his chest was faintly heating up. However, just as he was about to voice his approval and completely determine the direction of the team, "Hey, there's nothing over there." A light female voice, speaking the language unique to the demon race, rang out from behind the five of them like a ghost. Chapter 457. The sudden voice really gave the five of them a great shock. Since the chilly wind blew by just now, which almost turned the five of them into minced meat, the five lead disciples have further increased their vigilance, and their primordial spirit constantly scanned the surroundings. In this case, even a Yuanying stage expert would find it difficult to hide their trace, but as a result, who exactly was the voice behind them? Demon Master? Demon King? Or was it a higher-level demon? If not, how could it be so easy to hide from the perception of the five of them? These were not the 5 King Pill disciples randomly found in 9 regions, but the most talented young cultivators in 9 regions. Moreover, they had specially prepared for this trip for 3 months. Unless one used absolute power to crush them, their techniques were almost unparalleled in the same realm. However, if it was really a Demon King level powerhouse, no matter how skilled the 5 of them were, they would still die. Then, was this the end of their trip to the demon world? Could it be that the previous enlightenment in the group of immortal tombs and the opportunity in Kunlun Library were just a huge trap set by the demon race for the 9 regions? It was all for the sake of getting rid of these 5 talented and promising chief disciples? The so-called lead disciples, even if they had many flaws in their temperament, their brains were always very fast. A series of associations only needed a flash of time. And Wang Lu's action was even faster than the other lead disciples' thinking. After that light female voice sounded, Wang Lu directly thrust out a primal chaos sword chi toward the source of the voice. Although this sword chi was hurried, the King Pill level magical power combined with the immortal level swordsmanship caused a 100 meters long crack to open on the ground. At the same time, that light voice spoke again. "So it's the enemy? Then die." As soon as the voice fell, before the mysterious expert could make her move, a round earthy yellow sword defense bloomed. At the same time, the round sword defense seemed to have suffered a great pressure. At one point, the outer shell rapidly caved in. "Found you?" Wang Lu sneered, and the non-phase nameless sword came out. He used the primal chaos sword chi to attack first, not to hurt the enemy. He didn't even lock the enemy's position, so he couldn't use his power. Moreover, the chaos sword chi could only be used after he had mastered the King Pill. Overall, he was not used to attacking first. Wang Lu's rhythm had always been defensive and counterattacking. As long as the other party made the first move, victory was in his grasp. He didn't believe that this light woman's voice belonged to a Demon King level powerhouse. Just like that gust of chilly wind just now, it was powerful in that it was difficult to detect and defend against, but it didn't mean that they were really that strong. If the poison was really so strong that it couldn't be solved, how could he, a cultivator of the King Pill sect who wasn't good at detoxification and healing, remove the poison from the 4 chief disciples? In the great war of immortals and demons, what gave the immortal cultivators the most headaches was not the strength of the demon race, but the means of the demon race that were impossible to guard against. But on the other hand, if they could be prepared, the demon race, which had nearly caused the collapse of the 9 regions, would not be so difficult to defeat. A non-phase sword defense pointed out the direction for everyone, and the nameless sword sounded the horn of counterattack. Wang Lu didn't expect this sword attack to be successful, but at this time he was not fighting alone. Almost at the same time as Wang Lu launched his non-phase sword defense, Xiang Liang chose to launch a surprise attack, not in the direction of the nameless sword but in a remote wilderness. The speed of Taoist Master King Pill's surprise attack was very fast. In the blink of an eye, Xiang Liang flew several miles away and triggered a big explosion. In the explosion, the distortion of space could be vaguely seen, and at the same time, there was a muffled groan of a light and agile female demon. Xiang Liang's guess was right. The real position of the other party was neither the direction of the sound nor the direction of the attack of the non-phase sword defense. From the very beginning, that elusive demon had hidden itself very well, and the attack on Wang Lu might have been remotely controlled. However, when she made her move, she still left a flaw, and Xiang Liang was very good at grasping these flaws. However, at the same time, the other 4 lead disciples in the sword defense did not follow Xiang Liang. Wang Lu coldly snorted, but the direction of the nameless sword did not change at all. Zhan Zai and Qianghua also poured their firepower in the direction pointed by Wang Lu. Because there was not only one enemy, and in the previous Great War of Immortals and Demons, the demons' favorite tactic was to create a diversion. Thanks to the 3 months of special training, everyone could guess this. Therefore, the reaction of the 5 people present was fast and accurate enough, and their tacit understanding was also above the standard. Xiang Liang was responsible for the surprise attack, while the other 4 were responsible for completely suppressing the enemy's main force. The surprise attack of the 5 chief disciples split into 2 groups could be said to be spectacular, but after the first round of surprise attacks, aside from 2 muffled grunts, there were no other results. After a while, as the mountain collapsed and the earth cracked, dust fell to the ground, Xiang Liang returned the way he came, his face pale. His solemn expression showed that the results of the battle were not good. The lurking demon was still lurking, but the whistling wind was getting stronger and stronger. At this time, no one dared to take this ubiquitous cold wind lightly. Obviously, this was the unique skill of the demon race. Wang Lu's improved version of non-phase sword defense could isolate the cold wind, but they did not have the confidence to retreat under the cold wind. Therefore, Wang Lu's 30 feet square sword defense was their activity space, while the vast land outside the sword defense was the demon race's battlefield. If this drags on, we will definitely die, Zhou said in a sinking voice. Yes, we can't afford to drag on, Wang Lu simply responded. After a round of attack and defense, the several of them could basically judge that the opponent's strength was not unattainable. In a protracted fight, they would eventually reveal their flaws. However, the result of a protracted fight was that these human invaders would attract more and more attention, until the real Demon King arrived and the elite team would be wiped out. Therefore, I suggest that we cut the tangled hemp with a knife. Senior Sister Qianghua, you sacrifice yourself by exploding the king pill on the hill over there. We will take the opportunity to escape and hide, and when the situation calms down, we will continue to investigate the truth. During this period, we will remember your sacrifice so you can rest assured. As Wang Lu said that, he unceremoniously pushed Qianghua away. Qianghua had nothing to say about this kind of pig teammate. However, she also realized that the situation was indeed difficult to continue, and Wang Lu had done his best. As the first disciple of Xingjing sect's Wanxian League, she must play the role of a leader. Thereupon, on the sword altar in her jade mansion, the glittering and translucent immortal dew sword slowly sank, and a river of blood flowed out from the painting on the wall to wash the immortal sword. A moment later, the kill immortal sword condensed and took shape in the raging waves of the sea of blood. The immortal sword that bore the grief of hundreds of millions of creatures reappeared in the world. What the hell, this is even more ruthless than exploding the king pill? Are you planning to explode your teammates? Once the kill immortal sword appeared, the entire immortal dreamland could not withstand the power of the immortal sword. Now, if Qianghua were to use her sword again, Wang Lu's non-phase sword defense would basically be like a piece of paper. The final result would be nothing more than Qianghua as the flagship, leading her 4 teammates to win a miserable's victory. Rest assured it won't hurt you. Qianghua's voice has just fallen and she was about to make her move, when suddenly the cold wind stopped and the surrounding became deathly silent. The environment didn't seem to have changed, but the threat that the several lead disciples sensed had disappeared without a trace. She ran away. The kill immortal sword's power was too strong. Even before it revealed its edge, it could already cause the surrounding spiritual energy to become chaotic. The more sensitive demons would naturally be able to perceive the change, but if they were cautious by nature, they would temporarily retreat. Alright, let's go. With that, Qionghua's kill immortal sword sank back into the sword altar. However, the blood light of the immortal sword was hidden on her fingertips, which faintly deterred the surrounding area. The 4 lead disciples were silent. Qionghua's move was quite unexpected. The kill immortal sword was like a bow but not released, which meant that her control over the immortal sword had gradually entered the realm of refinement. However, in the 5 blood spirit crown battle, Qionghuo was far from having this kind of ability. At that time she had to go all out. The effect of the blood sacrifice of hundreds of millions of creatures was undoubtedly evident. Using the power of the immortal sword to deter the hidden enemy was certainly a wonderful move, but the several of them couldn't relax at all. The enemy was still there, but the immortal sword was exposed. In the vast land of the demon world, a lot of seeds of destruction had been buried. It seemed that this trip to the demon world would not last for too long. After finding out the truth, they would return to 9 regions as fast as possible. This time no one needed to say anything. Taking advantage of the rare silence, the 5 of them moved at full speed toward the place pointed by Qionghuo. And then, what the hell, you guys are running so fast? Wang Lu, who was the first to be left behind, was surprised. As the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, whose attack and defense attributes were the highest among the 5, Wang Lu didn't have an all-round suppression on the others. Because his speed was really a shortcoming. It couldn't be reflected when he was in a hurry, but once he needed to burst out at full speed, the problem would undoubtedly become obvious. Hold on tight. Upon hearing this, Zhou Mumu turned her head and grabbed Wang Lu's sleeve. At this time, the role of interpersonal relationship was very important. If it was Zhan Zai who fell behind, perhaps only Zhou Mumu's sneer would turn around to look for him. However, Qionghuo and the others didn't have the chance to leave Wang Lu too far behind. Therefore, not long after they continued to move forward, the enemy finally revealed their true colors. I told you there's nothing in front. The heavily armored demon girl angrily bared her fangs. Upon seeing her, Wang Lu was surprised. Lan? Although her temperament was very different from that of the young master of Grey Mountain, the iconic heavy armor, the dexterous long tail, and the red face and fangs. Who else could this be but Lan? To be precise, this was Lan's descendant. However, at the time of the 5 blood spirits crown battle, Lan was already alone. As the young master of Grey Mountain, she couldn't even manage her own business, let alone take care of her personal affairs. Later, under the leadership of Wang Lu, there was hope for the revival of Grey Mountain, but it was broken by Qionghua's sword, and all the people who could form a family with Lan were sacrificed by Qionghuo. Then, could it be that these 2 children were? Yes, the one who spent the longest time with Lan was. Thinking of this, the other chief disciples also turned their heads to look at Wang Lu. Zhou Mumu directly let go of Wang Lu's sleeve, and with an expression as if she had touched something dirty, she said, Wang Lu, I didn't expect you to be such a person. *CK, what nonsense are you talking about? Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised, but soon he also blew the horn to counterattack. Wang Lu sneered, surnamed Zhou, it's too late to draw a line with me now. You held my hand, so you're already pregnant with my child. Just wait to go back and give birth. Chapter 458. Since his debut, Wang Lu was not always undefeated. At least, when he practiced his swordsmanship on the mountain, he had lost many times to Lu Li. And before he mastered the King Pill and formed a generation gap with Lu Li, he actually didn't have much of an advantage against the girl's brilliant sword heart. His odds of winning were no more than 40 to 60%. As for the more powerful big sister Zhu Shiyao, needless to say, although the 2 of them didn't fight much, Wang Lu believed that his odds of winning were only 50% at most, which was not much of an advantage. Of course, it was still much better than that year when he had no chance of winning in a head-on fight. However, in terms of moral integrity, in addition to his master, Wang Lu was not inferior to anyone. Since Zhou Mumu gave him this move, then don't blame him for being impolite and becoming a father. Zhou Mumu could also be called a person with strong mind and tenacity. Especially since she met Wang Lu, she was shocked by his repeatedly breaking the lower limit performance, which made her nerves a lot sturdier. However, now that she was directly confronted by Wang Lu, she suddenly felt that her years of cultivation were vulnerable. Under the shame and anger, she almost went crazy. If the scene didn't change. Go back. The 2 heavily armored girls solemnly said. There's nothing in front of us. Nothing in front of us? This kind of self-confession was simply a signal for the several lead disciples to charge forward. Wang Lu and the others looked at each other, and then, as if by prior agreement, they all made their move. Primal Chaos Heaven-Splitting Sword Chi, Immortal Dew Sword Light, Thunder Body. The attacks of the 5 lead disciples immediately submerged the figures of the 2 heavily armored girls. Among them, Wang Lu's move was the most ruthless, regardless of the blood relationship between them. Blood relationship, my ass. Even if they were the descendants of Lan, so what? The 5 blood spirit crown struggle was, in the final analysis, just a show. Even if Wang Lu didn't reject the demon race, he also knew the difference between immortal and demon. Moreover, from the moment he saw the 2 heavily armored girls, Wang Lu had a vague, ominous premonition. The other party's strength was far from as weak as it looked. If they didn't use their full strength, the ones who would die would be them, the chief disciples. The intense attacks launched by the 5 chief disciples had stirred up a storm of energy, which had caused the ground within a radius of 1 mile to sink down by over 10 feet. This was the result of the high concentration of the magic power of the chief disciples, which prevented too much of the power from leaking out. In the center of the storm, the 2 heavily armored girls were in a sorry state. The girl in front was slightly taller, and the armor on her body was also heavier. At this moment, she was holding a tower shield, protecting the other girl behind her, but the all-encompassing energy storm still left their armor full of scars. The tower shield was also damaged by the chaotic sword chi and could no longer be used. Although it looked like it was difficult to continue, Wang Lu and the others continued to attack wave after wave. After experiencing the chilly wind whistling just now, everyone knew that the means of these devils were strange and unpredictable. Before completely establishing the victory, they must not lower their guard. Very good. In the gap between the storm, the demon girl's voice was no longer light and lively. Knowing our identities but still not repenting, the young devils these days are really becoming more and more useless. Since you insist on dying, we will help you. As she spoke, the shield-wielding girl suddenly dropped the shield in her hand. The armor on her arms and legs also naturally fell off, revealing crimson, smooth and eye-catching skin. However, before they could carefully admire that jade-like skin, as the armor fell off, an astonishing demon strength was released, immediately forming a strong gust of wind that slightly deflected the attacks of the 5 chief disciples. Then the demon girl roared and clasped her hands together. A red barrier of light rose up, completely isolating the attacks of the 5 chief disciples. Her defensive ability was several times better than the previous heavy shield. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. It turned out that the demon girl's heavy armor was not used to protect herself, but to suppress her strength. The less armor she wore, the more powerful her combat strength was. This was really a delightful setting. Wang Lu coldly snorted, everyone put in more effort, let her take off a few more pieces. Not long after, more offensive spells rained down like a storm. The demon girl's red barrier of light was on the verge of collapse. Left with no choice, the armor on her waist and shoulders also fell off, revealing a large area of her smooth skin. The red barrier of light finally stabilized. Come on, this girl is about to reveal some. But as he spoke, Wang Lu couldn't help but frown. Back then he had been with Lan for a long time, but he never knew that the demons of Grey Mountain had this kind of setting where their clothes would explode. He also didn't know that the starving girl had always been hiding her strength in front of him. He had long guessed that Lan might not be as simple as she looked, but he didn't expect her to hide it so deeply. However, now was not the time to think about the 5 blood spirits' crown, because danger was right in front of them. As the shackles of the demon girl's armor gradually disappeared, her strength also increased rapidly. As the heavy armor gradually turned into the erotic type, her strength increased again, impressively surpassing the level of the 5 chief disciples. Even if the 5 joined forces, it would still be difficult to suppress them. Even now, there were still a few key pieces of armor on the demon girl's body that had not been taken off. While covering her body, it also made people realize that her potential was still bottomless. And just as Wang Lu was wondering whether she would completely release all her strength at once, he suddenly felt his vision blur, and in the light barrier, the figures of the 2 demon girls disappeared. At the same time, Zhou Mumu's muffled groan sounded behind him, and then the girl was hit by a heavy object, flying back hundreds of feet, directly plunging into the ground with a loud crash. Without looking back, Wang Lu knew that this was the demon girls' counterattack, because although they had disappeared, their armors were still on the ground. The whole set was there. If there was no accident, the 2 girls were running naked at this time. The demon race was indeed the demon race, they were really open. However, the other party also had enough confidence to be so bold. Because after taking off the last 2 pieces of armor, their speed was already so fast that it was difficult for people to react, let alone catch them. In a hurry, Qianghua and Zhang Zai's spells repeatedly missed, and the cautious Yang Liang simply did not find an opportunity to attack. Even if Wang Lu wanted to see, he knew that with his current level of eyesight he simply could not see anything. What was the highest level of naked running? This was it. Damn, I really met the Demon King. Wang Lu narrowed his eyes, made a final evaluation of the demon girl in his heart, and then resolutely changed his move. The 5 of them joined forces, but they could not even catch the shadow of the demon girl, which could only mean that there was a generation gap between their strength. In this case, even if they fought desperately, they would only be asking for humiliation. It was time to use his trump card. Wang Lu reached into his mustard seed bag, hooked his finger and hooked out his trump card. It was an orange and red spotted mushroom, which was the little gift from South Pole Immortal Wang, a Da who had followed Immortal Wang for hundreds of years. After swallowing this bitter mushroom, Wang Lu felt that the king pill in his jade mansion seemed to burst open, and the violent energy swept out, causing the 206 sword bones to tremble. It was as if the sword bones that supported the sky were torn apart by the gale, and then extended along with the wind, becoming longer and thicker. No man would refuse the temptation of being thick and long, but if the price was heart-tearing and lung-splitting pain, perhaps many people would begin to hesitate. The taste of a mushroom that became bigger was not good. However, Wang Lu cultivated the non-phase method, so he had long been accustomed to the pain. Without changing his expression, he increased his body size by 10,000 times. A 300 meters tall giant appeared in the wilderness of the demon world. This? The companions beside him were the first to exclaim. As the lead disciples of the 5 uniques, each of them had a trump card at the critical moment. For example, Qionghua's Kill Immortal Sword was one of them. However, this trump card of Wang Lu was undoubtedly beyond the expectation of many people. The 2 demon girls were also stunned. Taking advantage of this rare opportunity, Wang Lu took a step forward and then stomped his foot down. The earth quaked and the mountains shook. The ground within a radius of several miles was crushed by Wang Lu's foot, and countless bottomless cracks bloomed. At the same time, the muffled groan of the 2 demon girls was like the sound of nature. The moment Zhou Mumu was knocked down by the surprise attack, Wang Lu had roughly calculated their radius of activity. Under the premise that he couldn't react in time, it was about a radius of 1 mile. Even if Wang Lu expanded his foot by 10,000 times with the help of the mushroom, his foot could not cover a radius of 1 mile. However, when he turned into a giant, he suddenly felt a flash of light in his mind. His non-phase sword defense and primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi accidentally had a trace of connection, and then they fused and wrapped around the sole of his foot. With this foot, his magical power erupted, and all the creatures within 1 mile were exterminated. The 2 demon girls simply could not avoid it. Indeed worthy to be the companion of the South Pole Immortal Wang for hundreds of years. This power was really... However, just when Wang Lu and the others were secretly shocked by the power of this blow, Wang Lu suddenly heard a tired but proud voice. So that's how it is. This is the reason why you're so fearless. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled and turned his eyes to the direction of the voice. 2 naked demon girls were supporting each other as they stood on a small hill in the distance. Both of them looked a bit embarrassed. Among them, the taller one was especially seriously injured, and it was almost difficult for her to stand. The demon girl, who was able to deal with the attacks of the 5 lead disciples with ease, was seriously injured by Wang Lu's foot. The effect of the mushroom left by the South Pole Immortal One could be clearly seen. However, at this time, those magical mushrooms were no longer in Wang Lu's hands. The younger and more petite demon girl was holding Wang Lu's mustard seed bag in her hand. Then one by one she took out the magical mushrooms from the bag with her slender fingers. As for the iron rule that the mustard seed bag could not be opened by the owner, it was as if it didn't exist in her hands. Wang Lu stared straight at her, his eyes awe-inspiring. It was not too unbelievable. If he could have a heaven-defying card, then why couldn't the demon girl, whose strength was above him, also have a trump card? It was probably through this trump card that she was able to survive the landslide and steal his mustard seed bag. Unfortunately, it was a bit too late to realize all this. With a trace of regret, Wang Lu's figure changed from a giant to an ordinary person. And what he heard was the demon girl's triumphant voice. I didn't expect there to be such a magical thing in this world. Just an inconspicuous mushroom can make people reborn. As she spoke, the demon girl took out 2 mushrooms, one for her sister, and directly swallowed them, even ignoring the fact that the same mushroom might have different reactions to different people, showing her extreme confidence in her digestive ability. And then, the 2 sisters swayed, their faces suddenly turned green, and then they fell to the ground. Wang Lu was stunned for a long time and then, under the puzzled eyes of Qianghua and the others, shook his head indifferently and sighed, "Alas, can mushrooms be eaten indiscriminately? These 2 fiend race women are seriously too lacking in common sense." With that, he stepped forward, walked to the top of the hill, and carefully looked at the 2 naked demon girls. Then Wang Lu turned his head and asked the others, "Should we do something to them?" Chapter 459. The demon race was indeed the demon race. In the 2 great wars of immortals and demons, the exuberant vitality of the demon race left a very deep impression on human cultivators. Cutting off the head and destroying the heart could not cause a fatal injury. Even the injury that touched the depths of the soul could not really defeat them. Moreover, compared to human, most of the demon race were immune to all kinds of poisons. Those deadly poisons in 9 regions might just be the dessert of the demon race. Therefore, even if they randomly ate the mushrooms, the 2 demon girls did not die on the spot, but just passed out. And Wang Lu and the others did not intend to take their lives, because this was their first battle trophy in the demon world. And if they wanted to uncover the truth hidden in the demon world, they had to find someone to ask. "Should we do something to them?" Wang Lu pointed to the demon race sisters who had fainted on the top of the mountain and asked with a serious look. "What are you going to do to them?" Zhou Mumu vigilantly examined Wang Lu, watching the latter's finger gesticulating back and forth on the enchanting curves of the demon race girls. "Don't mess around, they are, after all, demon race." According to the literature, sexual assault on the enemy of the opposite sex can effectively weaken the enemy's fighting spirit. However, there are also many counterexamples, so it can't be used as a common practice. As for the effect on the demon race, there are few pioneers, and the information is not sufficient. Wang Lu, if you don't mind, I hope to watch and record the whole process and collect data, which will play an important role in enriching the relevant research. Wang Lu was silent for a moment and then said, "In addition to going to bed, can you 2 think about serious things?" Zhou Mumu was stunned. She never thought that one day, it would be Wang Lu's turn to question whether the things in other people's minds were serious or not. When the 2 demon race girls woke up, they found that they had been very cruelly treated. All of their powers had been sealed by someone. The method of setting up the seal was very exquisite so that they could not resist at all. Even if they had great ability, they could not display it. They were forced to wear clothes. Moreover, there was more than one set. In addition to their custom-made armor, there were 7 to 8 sets of undergarments on the inside of the armor, and 4 to 5 sets of robes on the outside. Even their faces were wrapped tightly with silk, and they even wore blindfolds, making it airtight. He didn't know who came up with this idea. The idea was simple and plain, but it was indeed useful. Because they really couldn't exert any strength now. There were 2 main points to releasing an explosive force after removing the armor. First, one had to use the special armor to forcefully suppress one's strength for a long period of time before releasing the explosive force. Second, after removing the armor, one's body had to be in full contact with the outside world without any obstructions. Now, they had already used up all the energy they had accumulated, and the accumulation was no longer there. At the same time, their skin was blocked off from the outside world, so there was nothing they could do to reverse the situation. However, compared to the layers of clothes, the most lethal part was the mushrooms that they had swallowed. That was a highly toxic poison that even the devil race was terrified of. If it weren't for the fact that their aptitudes were among the best in the devil race, their bodies and souls would have been destroyed when they swallowed the mushrooms just now. Although they were lucky enough to not die, their internal organs were all on fire. In addition, their external powers were sealed, so they could not muster up any strength. Those 2 mushrooms had turned everything around. Before they lost consciousness, they were stunned to find that the effect of the mushrooms they had swallowed was not what they had expected. They knew that they had lost. They had lost to an incomparably insidious and despicable trick. That cunning opponent had deliberately used the mushrooms to attract their attention. When they had activated their secret method and staked everything on one throw to snatch the mushrooms, they had already fallen into the trap. However, a loss was a loss. According to the rules of the devil race, they would either die or face a fate worse than death. But as a devil race, they had long been aware of this. "We have something to ask you." Just as the 2 demon race girls were ready to die, Wang Lu opened his mouth to ask, "What have you been hiding all this time?" In fact, Wang Lu was really curious. If these two devil race girls had directly attacked without saying anything, Wang Lu wouldn't have been surprised. Whether it was his identity as a human cultivator being exposed, or the natural bloodthirstiness of the devil race, it was normal for a battle to break out on the land of the devil race. However, they said that there was nothing ahead, which was not normal. Although he could also leave the two of them and go straight ahead, after suffering a loss because of them, Wang Lu felt that it was better to be cautious. Not all the devil race girls would eat his big mushrooms without hesitation. However, upon hearing Wang Lu's words, the two girls who were wrapped like dumplings were startled. "Who exactly are you?" Upon hearing this, Wang Lu frowned. "What kind of question is this? If I ask what is ahead, I will be suspected. Could it be that the thing ahead is a secret that everyone in the devil race knows? And when they said that there was nothing ahead, did they mean something else?" "I don't know anything about it, so I exposed my identity as soon as I opened my mouth. That being the case, I might as well go straight to the point. We are cultivators from 9 regions. Human?" As soon as his voice fell, one of the dumplings on the ground suddenly jumped up, and her already exhausted power suddenly surged. However, after Wang Lu put dozens of layers of clothes on her, the suppression effect was too strong. As soon as the girl got up, she fell to the ground. However, after falling to the ground, she still cursed. "How dare you come here?" Another girl also angrily said, "So, the passage between the two worlds is open again? Very well, we will definitely rekindle the demonic fire in 9 regions and return the pain of the past 10,000 years 100-fold. Upon hearing this, the eyes of the 5 lead disciples lit up. Why did they come to the devil world? In addition to their own personal reasons, exploring the truth of the great war of immortals and demons was also one of the main tasks. These two obviously knew a lot of things, so if they didn't ask them, who else should they ask? "What do you mean by the pain of the past 10,000 years? Wang Lu asked. "According to the records of 9 regions, the first to ignite the fire of war is your demon race, so it's not your turn to take revenge." At hashtag. The 2 demon girls roared at the same time, bursting out unknown syllables. Unfortunately, Wang Lu and the others couldn't understand these words. The camouflage spell that they cast when they came to the devil world was limited, at least the translation effect was not perfect. However, they could guess that the 2 girls must have said the vulgar language unique to the demon race. The 2 girls probably felt that their cursing was not enough, so they simply jumped up. Moreover, because of their anger, they could even support themselves to stand upright. The taller one still tried to jump in front of Wang Lu to hit him. Unfortunately, because his eyes were blindfolded, Wang Lu only took 2 steps to the side, and the tall girl accidentally tripped on a stone and rolled all the way down the mountain. While Xiang Liang went down the mountain to bring back the confused girl, Wang Lu continued to question the petite girl. "Moreover, you demon race dare to talk about counterattacking 9 regions? You've been defeated by us twice, and now we, the young and promising Taoist Master King Pil, have taken the initiative to set foot on the land of the devil world. Where do you guys get the confidence to rekindle the war in 9 regions? We can let you guys defeat all of you with one hand, believe it or not." The petite girl looked like she was about to go mad with anger. Wang Lu looked back at Zhou Mumu and said with a smile, "It feels good to be able to scold her even though I don't understand what she's talking about." Zhou Mumu sighed and said, "Stop playing around, let's get down to business." Wang Lu's face turned serious. "I'm not playing around." Through her reaction, I have guessed 2 things. First, the demon race was really badly beaten in the past, and the injury has not been healed for thousands of years. Second, the demon race actually has no confidence to counterattack 9 regions. Because when I questioned their ability, they couldn't come up with anything, and only knew how to shout and wrangle. Third, because of this, the demon race has never thought about counterattacking 9 regions, and they don't even care about the situation of us human beings. This point can be judged from the fact that they have never recognized us. Wang Lu's speculation was not without reason, but it was still weak. Therefore, after some discussion, they decided to deal with the 2 demon girls and then go to the land in front of them to explore. However, just as Wang Lu was about to go up and finish them off, there was a sudden tremor under their feet. Looking around, there was only silence and blankness. There was nothing out of the ordinary, as if it was just an ordinary earthquake. However, Wang Lu didn't think so. He frowned and glanced at Qianghua. Among them, Qianghua had the highest cultivation base and the most comprehensive ability. If Wang Lu couldn't detect the abnormality, it didn't mean that Qianghua couldn't. However, Qianghua just frowned and said, "There seems to be some danger approaching. But I can't see it clearly." Wang Lu then turned his attention to the 2 demons on the ground. As local natives, they were the most likely to know the truth. However, when he turned his eyes, he saw the two lying side by side, motionless like zombies. "Hey, do you two know what this earthquake is about?" Zhou was a bit impatient and had already asked. Naturally, she couldn't get any answer. Wang Lu thought for a moment and patted Zhou on the shoulder. "Let's go." "Go?" They didn't speak, which just proves that the newcomer is dangerous because they want to use the newcomer to perish together with us. For them to make this judgment, it is obviously the other party's strength. They have already accepted their own death, so it doesn't matter what happens to them, so they are particularly calm at this time. Zhou listened and felt that it did make sense. Then what? Then of course we have to run, but we can't detect the source of the danger, so it's not necessarily the right direction to run in. But, at least there is one thing, that place with nothing in it may be the only safe corner. There was no time for Wang Lu to say a detailed analysis, but these words were enough to convince the other four. "Let's go." Qianghua was the first to stand up. She stretched out her hand and wrapped up the two demon girls on the ground with an immortal rope, and then took the lead to fly towards the mysterious place. With Qianghua's statement, the rest of them no longer hesitated. After crossing a mountain, the five people finally saw the place regarded as a forbidden area by the two demons, a place with nothing in it. Indeed, there was nothing but emptiness. But this emptiness was too unnatural. The ground within a radius of 10 miles was as flat as a mirror, so neat that it was almost strange. At this moment, the unknown threat finally arrived. It did not come from any specific direction but from all directions, covering the sky and covering the earth. The unique blood-colored clouds of the demon realm were suddenly dyed black by thick ink, and then rolled down. In a few blinks of an eye, the world of the demon realm was shrouded in darkness. And this scene suddenly reminded Wang Lu of something old. This is the Black Tide? Chapter 460. The Savage Land, the Black Tide of the Western Mountain, was once an important place for Wang Lu to practice cultivation. In the Black Tide, Wang Lu initially mastered the non-phase sword qi and became familiar with the method of burning innate vitality. It was also in the Black Tide that he met a stupid dog. Later, the dog followed him back to Spirit Sword Mountain and was identified as the Western Continent monster Wolf Fenrir. Although his cultivation time in the Black Tide was not long, he had experienced a lot of things, leaving behind even more mysteries. What he saw and heard in the Black Tide, Wang Lu had never seen it in any information outside of Spirit Sword Mountain, as if it was a specialty that only Spirit Sword Mountain had. Many of the strange scenes in the Black Tide were also contrary to common sense and inexplicable. Moreover, after that Black Tide practice, there seemed to be some opposition in Heavenly Sword Hall, so that Wang Lu never entered the Western Mountain again. Later, even his big sister Zhu Shiyao, who had always been accustomed to fighting in the Black Tide, was forbidden to enter the Western Mountain. These things puzzled Wang Lu, but the elders firmly refused to talk about it. Thus, Wang Lu realized that the elders probably did not want him to know about these things, so, for the time being, he respected their opinion. In any case, Wang Lu always had a lot of problems to deal with, so there was no need to deliberately open this branch. And now, Wang Lu finally saw the Black Tide again, but there were even more mysteries in his heart. The Black Tide of the demon world was far more terrifying than what he saw at the foot of the Western Mountain. The thick darkness brought an amazing sense of oppression. In the past, when he was still in the qi cultivating stage, he was still able to survive in the Western Mountain. But now that he was promoted to Taoist Master King Pil, his strength was hundreds and thousands of times more than in the past. He was oppressed and unable to move. Come to think of it, if he did not stay in the Western Mountain but continued to go deep into the Savage Land, he would probably encounter this kind of Black Tide one day. But why? Why did the Black Tide of the Savage Land appear in the demon world? It was hard to believe that it was a coincidence, but to say that there was a connection between the two. What kind of connection did the Lingzhen School, one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, have with the demon world? Unfortunately, Wang Lu did not have time to think too much. The Black Tide had completely descended. In the face of such a drastic change, Qianghua and the others were at a loss. Although each of them had their own life-saving trump cards, no one could guarantee that they would survive the Black Tide, because such a catastrophe was truly unheard of. Dig. At this critical moment, Wang Lu assumed the role of commander. While speaking, he took the lead in opening a bottomless pit on the ground with the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi. Come in. After the 5 of them entered the underground cave, Wang Lu immediately turned around and sealed the entrance with an earth element spell. Then he took out a few bright jades from his mustard seed bag and lit them up. Fortunately, as a professional adventurer, he had the spirit of a squirrel. He would not throw away anything that he could avoid. He still kept the items he found in the West Mountain Black Tide. The bright jade was indeed very effective. Several pieces were ignited at the same time, and the cave was filled with light. The black mist that penetrated through the cracks in the soil shrilly shrieked and retreated. Wang Lu was relieved. When he used the bright jades to fight against the black tide was at the primary level that even a chi cultivating stage cultivator could barely survive. But now the pressure of the black tide had been strengthened thousands of times. Unexpectedly, the bright jades were really useful. What is this? Zhou curiously tried to touch it with her hand. Wang Lu unceremoniously pushed her hand away and said, "How old are you? How could he be so careless and hit everything? Aren't you afraid of touching shit?" Zhou disdainfully withdrew her hand. However, Zhan Zai's eyes suddenly lit up. "Hey, this is the seed of the eternal tree." "Huh?" Wang Lu was also taken aback. "The seed of the eternal tree?" Zhan Zai repeatedly nodded, and then took out a set of equipment from his mustard seed bag. He then unceremoniously took out a relatively intact piece of bright jade from the pile, extinguished the flame and put it into a jade bottle. At the bottom of the jade bottle, there were many thin silk lines connected to a set of measuring instruments. A moment later, the water screen projection of the instrument reflected many complex numbers and marks. Zhan Zai nodded while looking at it and finally confirmed, "That's right, this is the seed of the eternal tree. If you don't believe me, look." With that, he summoned the eternal tree from his jade mansion. However, this time there was only one branch, and at the end of the branch, there was a little bit of glittering and translucent luster, which was 80 to 90% similar to the bright jade. Thus, Wang Lu fell into a deeper confusion. Why did the seed of the eternal tree appear in the 9 regions, the savage land? Was there any logical relationship between them? At this time, the demon race girl, who was wrapped like a rice dumpling by Qianghua, suddenly jumped up and sternly asked, "Where did you get it?" Wang Lu kicked her to lie flat on the ground. "Pay attention to your identity, Miss Asterisk Asterisk Asterisk. This is not the place for you to yell. Where did you get the seed of the eternal tree? What do you care? You're already dead, so if you're dead, then please act like a dead person and lie down." After a moment of silence, the arrogance of the 2 demon race girls suddenly extinguished, and their attitude softened infinitely. Please tell us, where did you find the seed of the eternal tree?" Wang Lu stretched out his hand and pointed at Zhan Zai. "In his stomach." "What, you don't believe me? Do you think it's impossible for a seed to be in a person's stomach? Humph, have you ever eaten fish roe?" As soon as his voice fell, Zhan Zai didn't have any reaction, but Zhou very firmly took a step back, a bit further away from the burning bright jade. Obviously, she was disgusted by Wang Lu's fish roe theory. After a moment of silence, the taller demon race girl suddenly made a sound. Then, her nose moved and she turned her head in the direction of Zhan Zai. "I really seem to smell the smell of a tree." While speaking, the taller girl couldn't help but squirm toward Zhan Zai. Her head, which was tightly wrapped in silk, blindfold and other things, also tried to move forward. Although it was covered, Wang Lu could still feel the girl's scorching eyes. Then he sighed. "Hey, the direction of your eyes is aimed at the big tree between senior brother Zai's legs. But your reaction makes me curious about one thing. What happened to the eternal tree in your demon world?" Zhan Zai said, "I also want to ask. Since entering the demon world, I can't feel the call from the eternal tree. But when I was in 9 regions, I could clearly see the shadow of the eternal tree." For a time, everyone seemed to have their own questions and none of them seemed to have an answer. In the silence, Qianghua suddenly said, "The seed of the eternal tree can resist the strange black mist, so there is likely to be a connection between the two. But the eternal tree that should exist has disappeared, so I think it could be." Wang Lu said, "The black tide is transformed by the eternal tree? It's indeed a way to think. The eternal tree of the demon world encountered an accident and was transformed into the black tide that destroyed all living things. And because of this, the demon world has lost the capital to counterattack the 9 regions. In this way, several clues can be connected together." As he spoke, Wang Lu nodded his head again and then inwardly sighed. She was indeed worthy to be his senior sister Qianghua. Her IQ level was not on the same level as that of the other lead disciples. Unfortunately, the path was wrong. The more knowledge she had, the more reactionary she would be. Qianghua's intelligence and wisdom would only lead her further and further down the wrong path. The current Qianghua was still the same Qianghua who could sacrifice hundreds of millions of creatures without batting an eyelid. She was still the same Qianghua who regarded the difference between immortal and demon as a matter of life and death. She was still the same Qianghua who believed that she was the leader of 9 regions and must shoulder the heavy responsibility that ordinary people could not bear. Along the way, Wang Lu repeatedly provoked her, but she remained indifferent. It was precisely because she had the mind of a leader. If such a Qianghua could become a true teammate, it would be a great blessing. Unfortunately, the path was not right. Wang Lu once again sighed regretfully in his heart, and then pondered a bit about what reason he should use to find fault with Qianghua to clearly show his position. This black mist is indeed related to the eternal tree. Zhan Zai suddenly made a clear judgment. He pointed to his pile of complex instruments and equipment and said, "There is a great correlation between the two." Then he closed his mouth and said nothing. Zhou Mumu curiously asked, "That's it? What about the process? How did it come to be related?" Zhan Zai sneered and said, "With your academic level, can you even understand what I said? It's enough to remember the result. At least you still have this kind of memory, right?" Zhou Mumu raised her eyebrows. She was about to fight to the death with Zhan Zai here. Fortunately, Qianghua spoke again. "Just now the 2 demons said that there is nothing here. Did they mean the eternal tree?" Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, "The possibility is not small. This is probably the site of the eternal tree. Well, I'm afraid it's more than that. In addition to the eternal tree, there should be other things." With that, Wang Lu reached out and clenched that piece of red jade that was already burning hot. The red jade in his hand was undoubtedly an important clue, but Wang Lu didn't want to expose it so quickly. Now that the eternal tree's line has not been completely sorted out, there was no need to open a new branch. Moreover, the primary problem now was the black tide. It was true that the bright jade could resist the black tide, but Wang Lu also discovered that, because the intensity of the black tide here was far stronger than the black tide in the western mountain, the bright jade was burning very fast and obviously could not last for too long. And it was also unknown how long this black tide would last. However, there was no need to worry about this, because Wang Lu had already thought of a solution. At least 2 people here knew how to survive in the black tide. Using the bright jade to resist the black tide was not the only way, because the 2 of them could still be alive and kicking today. It was not because they used the bright jade as charcoal every day, right? Of course, no one expected them to honestly cooperate, but now everyone could take what they needed. "Let's make a deal. We will tell you what we know about the eternal tree, and you will tell me how to survive in the black tide." Bah! Wang Lu was not surprised by the stubbornness of the demon girls. Persuading them with kind words was certainly not going to work, so the next step was, "It doesn't matter if you don't say it," Wang Lu said and pointed his finger at Zhan Zai. "He has a new eternal tree on him. If you are willing to watch him die together with the eternal tree, then stay silent." In just one sentence, the 2 demon girls' hearts were suddenly pierced. "Let us go, we will take you to a safe place." Chapter 461. Wang Lu was now somewhat regretful, because he felt that he had made a bad deal. Just now, in order to ensure their safety under the black tide, he promised to let the 2 of them live, and the 2 of them told him the safe place. In Wang Lu's view, this was a fair deal. However, when he lifted the seal on the 2 girls, the 2 of them just pointed downwards. "It's down there?" Wang Lu was puzzled. "What do you mean by down there?" "Dig down another 10 feet and you'll be there." Wang Lu was surprised to hear this. Without even using his sword qi, an earth element technique bloomed from his fingertips, melting the soil under his feet. After digging for less than 10 feet, the ground below suddenly became clear, and a bottomless pit appeared in front of him. "What is this?" Zhou Mumu said in disbelief, her eyes glowing, trying to see the situation in the hole. With her king pill level cultivation base, her perception of the environment was already very keen, but before Wang Lu opened the passage, she did not notice the huge hole 10 feet below her feet. This hole was really strange. Moreover, no matter how she changed her cultivation technique, the cave was still pitch black. "What's inside?" As soon as her voice fell, she heard a sizzling sound. The bright jade on the ground had been burned out, and from the cracks in the soil, countless black fog spread in. "Let's go in first." Wang Lu grabbed Zhou Mumu's sleeve and jumped into the hole with the girl. Then, with a flash of light, it suddenly became clear. Looking from above, it was obviously pitch black, but when they entered, they saw a bright light in front of them. The white light covered every inch of space, making them feel as if they were in a sacred palace. This scene was not unfamiliar to some people. "It looks like we are inside the eternal tree." During the period of the five spirits' power struggle, Zhan Zai and Zhou Mumu, as the wood spirit and water spirit respectively, had entered the core of the eternal tree, which was quite similar to this place. This is indeed the inside of the eternal tree. The former eternal tree. The tall demon girl said coldly. Former? Wang Lu asked, is the eternal tree really finished? If the eternal tree was still here, how could it be your turn to be arrogant here? The petite girl angrily said, wasn't it you human cultivators who cut off our eternal tree? Why are you asking such a question now? Humans cut down the eternal tree? Wang Lu was surprised. When did this happen? How come I've never heard of it? Can you tell me in detail? You're still playing dumb. As the petite girl spoke, she once again gathered power within her body. For the devil race, anger was also a source of power. Wait a minute. The tall girl pulled her back. These humans are a little different. What's different? They were clearly the same blasphemer. They even dared to plant the seed of eternity in that filthy human. The petite girl roared as she broke free from the other girl's grasp. Then the armor on her limbs fell off, and it looked like she was about to fight again. The tall girl frowned. She clearly didn't want to fight, but since her companion was so determined, she could only fight to the end. At the end of the day, the other party was just a few human cultivators. Killing them was not a big deal. Thinking of this, her armor also began to fall off, and her strength steadily rose. Seeing that the demon race girl was so obviously hostile, the several lead disciples naturally assumed a fighting posture. However, after experiencing the power of these two demons, no one had the confidence to win against her. No one could have imagined that the demon race girl, who had just been beaten to a near-death state, would actually, just because of a few words from Wang Lu, be angry and resurrected. If the demon race had this ability, 9 regions would have long been overturned by the demon race. At this critical moment, Zhou Mumu suddenly called out her blood-marked divine spear and then pointed it at Zhan Zai. Hey, don't you want the eternal tree? Eternal tree? What a joke. The petite girl sneered and then screamed to the sky. At the same time, Zhan Zai fell to the ground, bleeding from his 7 orifices. You dare to mention the eternal tree in this space? Stupid blasphemer, can't we kill you and take out the eternal tree sapling ourselves? What the F*** Zhan Zai, you're just a fragile kid, yet you're actually killed in seconds. Wang Lu clenched his teeth, deeply feeling that the world was unpredictable. Zhan Zai was silently killed in seconds, which was obviously caused by the resonance of the eternal tree. Compared to his branch, the 2 girls controlled the eternal tree itself. The 5 lead disciples were already at a disadvantage against the 2 demon race girls. Now that they lost one more person, they really had no chance of winning. As for the mushrooms of the South Pole Immortal One, needless to say, Wang Lu didn't dare to eat them. Now that things have come to this, junior brother Wang Lu, presumably you have nothing to say, right? At the critical moment, Qianghua lightly opened her mouth and calmly asked Wang Lu. Wang Lu knew what she wanted to say. Wang Lu didn't have a card in his hand, but she did. Once the Kill Immortal sword came out, the 2 demon race girls would definitely die. Although they were strong, it would still be difficult for them to block the Kill Immortal sword. Although their speed was fast, when there was a black tide outside, their range of action was limited to this bright place, and they couldn't escape the locking range of the Kill Immortal sword. However, if Qianghua really made a move, there would be no room for mediation. However, Wang Lu went through all this trouble not to let the 2 of them die just like that. There's no need to waste it, I have a way. Wang Lu said, made a decision in his heart, and took out the red jade pendant. In fact, he couldn't hide it anymore. After entering this space, the red jade pendant kept heating up. Now, even his non-phase golden body couldn't bear it anymore. If he didn't take it out, he was afraid it would explode in his hand. And since the red jade pendant had made such a clear statement, it was obviously the time for it to show up. As soon as the red jade pendant appeared, the 2 demon girls suddenly opened their eyes wide, and an incredulous look appeared on their faces. This is, why do you have? While talking, the 2 of them unconsciously knelt down. Although they were in a fighting state without their armors, the power in their body was rapidly dissipating. They didn't want to fight anymore. Moreover, they clearly expressed their intention to surrender. This amazing change was beyond Wang Lu's expectation. He looked at the blazing red jade pendant, and then looked at the demon sisters who had already knelt down in front of him. After thinking for a moment, he immediately raised the red jade pendant in front of Qianghua. Senior sister Qianghua, seeing this red jade pendant, what do you think? Qianghua sighed, at least, I never thought of kneeling down and begging for mercy. Tiske, this red jade is really useless. Wang Lu said, put away the red jade pendant and then asked the two demons, do you recognize it? Yes, of course I know it. Any sane demon wouldn't mistake it for someone else. The tall girl said one word at a time, the proof of the demon realm supreme, the most dazzling demon jade on the 5 blood spirit crown, how could I not recognize it? The demon jade on the 5 blood spirit crown? Wang Lu was surprised because at this time he recalled that when he gave the 5 blood spirits crown to Lan, there was no such a big red jade on the crown. The volume was obviously a lot smaller, and it didn't have the special effect of heating up. Therefore he did not take it seriously at that time. Later, when he met that black demon and obtained this red jade pendant, he did not think about the 5 blood spirit crown. Unexpectedly, this red jade turned out to have such an origin. And when he thought about the competition for the 5 blood spirit crown, the legend about the blood crown, it is said that the person who obtains the blood crown can rule the demon realm. Yes, the master of the blood crown is the master of the demon realm, this is the law of the demon realm. Wang Lu pointed to himself, then in other words yes, you are the master of this land and all sane demons on this land must obey your orders. As soon as this statement came out, not to mention Wang Lu, even the other chief disciples were surprised. Zhou Mumu said in surprise, Isn't this the great demon king? Xiang Liang also said, so, junior brother Wang Lu will become the supreme commander of the demon realm. Wang Lu was not so optimistic, that's only a theoretical possibility, right? Do you think it's possible that a piece of red jade can command a world? If it were you, if Qianghua holds the Wanxian Li Golden Order of Supreme He Tu and wants you to tie the knot with Zhan Zai, will you obey? Zhou Mumu was surprised, don't make such malicious assumptions, okay? I have goosebumps all over my body. How could Supreme He Tu issue the Wanxian Li Golden Order for such a boring thing? And even if he really issues it, I won't obey it. Although in theory no one disobeys the Golden Order, but at worst I can quietly kill that bitch Zhan Zai. He too can't let me marry a dead man, right? Zhan Zai was immediately unhappy. The effect of the Wanxian League Golden Order is based on the supreme credibility of the Wanxian League, which unifies the 9 regions immortal cultivation world. When you join the Wanxian League and enjoy all kinds of conveniences, you have to abide by its rules. You can't openly destroy this order just because of your own personal preferences. As the lead disciple of Kunlun sect, you should have such awareness. In the face of Zhan Zai's serious competition, Zhou Mumu just turned her head sideways and curled up the corner of her mouth. Idiot. You? Wang Lu also advised, Senior Brother Zai, if the Supreme really issues the order, will you really become Senior Sister Zhou's Taoist companion? Zhan Zai was stunned and then imagined the scene. Suddenly, his face turned livid, I will obey the order, but I will divorce her as soon as possible. You idiot, you actually dare to divorce me? Zhou Mumu angrily said. Wang Lu launched his non-phase sword defense, separated the two of them and then said, in short, even the Wanxian League Golden Order can't make you obey it wholeheartedly. Instead, you try to find a way to exploit loopholes. I want to ask, how can a mere piece of red jade have such a great effect that it can make the demons obey it? Zhou Mumu said, who knows about the demon world? But there must be basic logic, right? It can instantly brainwash the creatures of a world, even a true immortal can't do it, but can a piece of red jade do it? Zhou Mumu was suddenly speechless. Moreover, Wang Lu said and then turned his head to look at the 2 girls kneeling on the ground. Just now, she said that all the sane demons on earth will listen to my order. In other words, most of the demons in the demon world are not sane, right? Chapter 462. Most of the creatures in the demon world were not sane? Wang Lu's assumption made the other 4 lead disciples frown. Because this was really a weird assumption. In the mainstream rumors about the demon world in 9 regions, the demon race was a group of irrational killing machines. Their existence was to destroy all things in the world, especially the mortal enemy of human beings. The records of the first great war of immortals and demons were too vague. Perhaps there were still this and that. However, when it came to the second great war of immortals and demons, it was purely a massacre. If they had not experienced the struggle for the 5 blood spirit crown in the group of immortal tombs and personally witnessed the joy, anger, sorrow and joy of the demon race, it was indeed difficult to believe that they had human nature. But, while they were puzzled, the petite girl flatly said, yes, there are not many sane creatures left in the demon world. There was a kind of calmness in her tone of voice. Wang Lu looked at the empty space around him and suddenly thought, is it our fault? The petite girl raised her eyebrows, and her body slightly trembled, seeming to be emotionally unstable. However, compared to her previous posture of fighting naked, she was much calmer. The effect of the red jade seemed to be effective on her. However, it was unrealistic to expect her to calmly explain the whole story. Fortunately, the mood of the girl next to her was much more stable. The effect of the 5 blood spirit crown is the result of the law of the demon world. She softly said, and a large part of the law of the demon world comes from the eternal tree. Wang Lu asked, so, when the eternal tree of the demon world is gone, the 5 blood spirit crown has lost its meaning? But it seems to be effective on you guys. Yes, because we are the guardians of the eternal tree. Although the eternal tree has been cut off, it has not been completely destroyed. At least here its effect is still there. In other words, as soon as we go out, you two will fight to the death with us. The demon girl raised her eyes, lowered her head, and said, human and demon have an irreconcilable blood feud. Shouldn't we be the ones to say that? Wang Lu shrugged. The demon girl said, I don't know how you humans recorded that part of history, but for us, it was you who started the war first, and it was you who caused everything that happened afterwards. If you suffer any losses in the war between the two worlds, you only have yourself to blame. You brought this upon yourself? Zhou Mumu's anger flared up, but she was quickly stopped by Wang Lu. Wang Lu said, the historical record may not be accurate. We have an old saying in the 9 regions that history is a little girl who can be decorated by the victors. The demon girl said indifferently, then, we are the victors to decorate her. Wang Lu was not surprised by this. To be able to become the guardian of the eternal tree, of course he would not be an ordinary person. Not to mention, according to the history of the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown, the Grey Mountain lineage was the winner of the blood crown, the true demon king bloodline. Then, have you seen this person? As Wang Lu spoke, he projected Haze's face with a spiritual spell. The girl had a red face and fangs, but it did not look ferocious. Instead, her serious face revealed a very heroic spirit. However, in front of him, her 2 descendants shook their heads. I've never seen her. Never? Don't you have a genealogy or something to record history? We don't need it because history is in our blood. I can be sure that there has never been such a member of our race. Although she looks like a member of my race, it's mostly something fabricated out of thin air by you human cultivators. History is in the blood? While Wang Lu was curious about the meaning of this sentence, Xianghua explained. The king of the demon world is recognized by the laws of the demon world, the monarch of the world. Before she could finish, Wang Lu interrupted. So they have the privilege of the laws, omniscient and omnipotent, and at the same time, their blood can inherit their memories, so that the descendants of the demon king can always maintain their superiority? Xianghua was not annoyed by being interrupted, but nodded in agreement with Wang Lu's speculation. Then she added, the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown has other secrets. Wang Lu sneered and said, do you need to say that? Now we just need to wait for the result of the identification of the heavenly silk headscarf. When he first delved into the plot of the 36 chains, Wang Lu inadvertently triggered the hidden plot in Peach Garden Village and witnessed the reversal of history. As the evidence, the heavenly silk headscarf was taken away by Yin and Yang school's disciples, Tiandao Lan and the others, and then brought back to the sect to identify its authenticity. If it was really the most valuable treasure of Yin and Yang school, then the group of immortal tombs had created a miracle of time reversal. If it was not, then it meant that the heavenly silk headscarf had another origin. As a result, Tiandao Lan and the others never came back, and there was no accurate answer for several years. It was not that the people of Yin and Yang school intended to embezzle the heavenly silk headscarf, but after Tiandao Lan brought it back, the elders of Yin and Yang school tried their best to identify its authenticity. It stood to reason that the Nikhang feather coat was the most valuable treasure of Yin and Yang school, so as long as the heavenly silk headscarf was matched with the other parts, it could be identified by their compatibility. However, Yin and Yang school had experienced thousands of years of vicissitudes, during which there were many upheavals. As early as in the library of Kunlun Immortal Mountain, the several of them had learned that the relationship between the 9 regions and the demon world was by no means simple. There were many hidden secrets, but unexpectedly, the hidden secrets were actually this, shocking. If the eternal tree is still there, the laws of the demon world are still there. With this red jade, you can rule the demon world, and from then on, the 2 worlds of immortals and demons would coexist peacefully, no more bloodshed. Unfortunately, as early as 2,000 years ago, this possibility was personally destroyed by you human beings. You thought that by destroying the eternal tree, You could make the demon world sink forever, but the final collapse of the laws actually made you pay a painful price. The demon race girl said and then pointed to the top of her head. I don't know where you got the eternal tree sapling, nor do I know where you found the 5-spirit jade. If you want to easily conquer the demon world, then, look, this is the land you conquered. Barren, desolate, only the black tide everywhere, and the demon race creatures that have lost their spirituality are not worthy to be called as living beings. I hope you like it. With the irreconcilable hatred between the immortals and demons, when he heard that the demon world had almost collapsed, Wang Lu of course should like it. But he just couldn't be happy. Similarly, even Xiong Hua, who was the most insistent on the distinction between immortals and demons, didn't have even half a smile on her face. This group of cultivators had been frequently instilled with the idea of the struggle between immortals and demons since they embarked on the road of immortal cultivation. Even though no one thought that the third great war of immortals and demons would break out in their lifetime, this idea was deeply rooted. Now, this deeply rooted idea finally began to collapse. In the silence, Zhou Mumu couldn't hold back her temper. What if? The girl hesitated and said, what if we rebuild the eternal tree? Look, we have a sapling with good growth potential here. If we transplant it here again. Before she could finish, Zhan Zai interrupted. Hey, it has already been combined with me, how can I transplant it? Zhou Mumu was not polite. Then I'll bury you alive here. It's a good thing for the demon world and the 9 regions. You women are simply unreasonable. Seeing that the two of them were about to quarrel again, the demon girl smiled and said, there is also a way to transplant it. The vitality of the eternal tree is tenacious. As long as the seeds and branches are cultivated in a specific way, they can grow again. And when the eternal tree is reborn, we can also expel the black tide little by little and rebuild the demon world civilization. This process will not even be particularly long. In just a few hundred years, we can restore the prosperity that the demon world should have. But why do you want to do that? Right now, this demon world that has nothing but death is the most beneficial for you human beings, isn't it? As long as the passage between the two worlds is sealed, with the ability of these mindless creatures, they will never be able to threaten you. With that, she looked at Xiong Hua again. As for the two of us, we are the last descendants of our race. Under the protection of the eternal tree ruins, we are struggling at death's door, but we have neither the power to reproduce nor the motivation to continue to survive. If nothing unexpected happens, within 100 years, we and the shelter left by the eternal tree will disappear. The demon world will also be completely plunged into darkness. After that, the demon girl fell into silence. Similarly, the 5 lead disciples were also silent. Before the trip to the demon world, they had made all kinds of preparations. Even if they encountered the demon king, they had the corresponding means to deal with it. However, the current situation was even more tricky than fighting the demon king. In the end, it was Wang Lu who came forward to make the final decision. Very well, then we'll do as you say. The young man clapped his hands and pointed to the demon girl. You guys just wait for death here. We're going home to eat. With that, he turned his head and looked at Zhan Zai. Okay, send us back. Zhan Zai was stunned for a long time and then spread out his hands. Oh. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.